Well, it's 13:06, so might as well get started. If anyone else wants to join late, they can. It's not locked. So, again, welcome everybody to this first inaugural installment of Study Hall with Jeeve. Our topic for today is going to be going over writer's block, something that everyone who's been writing, hobbyist or otherwise, goes through. And I tried to do my best to make sure this would be actually informative and engaging. I'll get into it in the later slides, but a lot of research did go into this workshop. So afterwards, please let me know if it was helpful or not. But without further ado, let us begin. Let's see. So our agenda for today, we're going to go over introductions very quickly. While I've been here a little bit, I would still like to hear a little bit about you guys. It'd be nice to put some icons to profile pictures. Then, as for the actual topics for today, number 2 will be defining writer's block, because the definition varies from academic to academic. Of course, going over the writing process, why that's important, and how that reduces the likelihood of blockage, we'll say. And then actual tangible solutions, things that you can actually do to help, and not just skirt around the issue, if that makes sense. Very well then. So who's who? All right. Now, a little bit about myself. I currently teach 7th grade ELA and advanced English at a middle school during the day, and then I do creative writing classes in the afternoon at a community college. And when I have time, I of course do write. It's getting harder and harder to carve out time because I'm getting busier and busier as we go into the spring season. Lots of students just realizing now that they have to get their work done, and all the time they wasted in the winter is actually coming back to bite them in the arse, but it is what it is. I do have a few professional writing credits, but no published works of my own. All those credits are for educational books, right? So a lot of the textbooks you would find in a middle school or high school classroom, they're not, the way they're structured is you have essentially someone with a PhD who is overseeing, or I guess a team of PhD holders who are overseeing the actual content, and then it's all pretty much ghost written. Well, not ghost written, we get credits, but essentially they're given to bidders, contractors, to fill out the information in the textbook, right? So you'll see that like this textbook is by Dr. Kaufman, whoever, and then under Dr. Kaufman would be 30 other no names who actually wrote the material. It's a very questionable practice, but if you want to get your name out there, you do what you have to do. And on the side, usually on the weekends, I am also developing my own little adventure RPG indie game called Tales from Alteria. I don't talk about it much because this is a writing server and writing is a strong passion of mine. But if you're interested, I can drop a link or some pictures sometime. I should probably ask. I don't think there are any questions about that. Yes, AP. Most large ones are pretty much right, and they're not they won't tell you that. They won't tell you that, but it is kind of an awful practice. Let me rephrase that. I won't say an awful practice. It can work, and it can work well, but I don't like how abusable it is. It's a very abusable system, unfortunately. I have people that I wrote with that did not receive credits because the contracts they signed stipulated as such that they would not, which is very, very unfortunate. It's a common practice in the industry, but you're not gonna hear any investigative pieces about it, right? It's hard enough getting people to read. Anyway, yes, Turtles, pretty much so. Very corporate. At any rate, so you don't have to speak this. I will monitor chat, but I would like, just for a few, if someone would tell me your pen name or what you write under, what you've written and what you're currently working on. This is really just for me to kind of collate projects, because I hear a lot about, okay, this person's written this, and then it's hard for me to essentially organize that for reading later. Go ahead, AP, you can go.
I've written a lot of shit, actually. Let's see here. Let me pull up my list. I have a writing chat that I have all of my stuff pinned, or at least links to it. But I've written Advent Provides, which is an XCOM fanfic that's like 200,000 words long. I am currently working on another one called Vipers, Knights, and French Fries. That one is almost 50k words at this point. I was also working on a dragon story for a little bit that's like, I don't want to say the word OC, but that's what it is. It's an original universe that I came up with. That one is still kind of a work in progress. I got some feedback on it, and at some point, when I get more time, I want to revisit it and make it better, and then continue writing it, because it's not finished yet. And then I have some smaller ones, and a shitpost one, but the one that is shorter that I actually finished that I really like was The Cobbler and the Kobold. I wrote that one around Christmas. But yeah, Jeeve, if you ever want to look at my stuff, it's all linked in my chat.
Very, very good.
And yeah, and what I'm currently working on, and yeah, like I said, is the Vipers, Knights, and French Fries.
Quite nice. Okay, so that's why I did these introductions, because I've read the Vipers, Knights, and French Fries one, and I have read Advent Provides. That was the one I finished before I joined the server, and I had no idea you wrote both of those. Yes, I had no idea, because your pen name is not the same as on Discord, so that's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me check who else I have. His name, G with ellipses. Yes, G, about the same for me. I found the server. I forgot whose story it was that had a link to it, but I remember it was about an Anon and a Viper in a parking lot with a car, I think, and the Viper was trying to drive the car. Oh, of course, Drunken's coming.
Dude, that's me.
You wrote that?
Yeah, that was my shitpost.
Oh, yeah. That's the only reason I come here, because it had the link at the bottom, and I was like, this is very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll do my introduction. I just write by Drunken Turtles, or Drunk Turtles, some form of Drunken and Turtles, and I've written a lot. I've written a lot of fan fiction stuff, which it has been nuked off the face of the internet, and no one will ever see it again. And yes, it's all saved on a flash drive somewhere. And then I moved on to doing some SCP, never really published anything, but I had some things written. After that, I moved to Reddit. I work a lot with the HFY community. They're pretty chill people. Make quite a few stories for them. And I have that link. I have my Reddit account linked and my Discord account. I also have my AO3. I've written 2 stories currently. The one that Jeeves you talked about, and then one of them was a rewrite of another award-winning one that I made. It was just like a college thing, like a creative writing college competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I got first place in it, so I was like, isn't this like good enough to get first place competition? I'll just rewrite it and then post it on AO3 or give it a touch up. And currently, I am working on a lot of things. Right now, my biggest one is Bluebird. Vig is going to give me some shit about this, I know for a fact. Because I've been working it for 2 years now. But it's close to done. And after that, I have like a lot of finished things that I need to touch up and publish. So it's like, I don't know, a few dozen stories in the works. I think, and after that, I also have another big one in the works, but that's like for the future, because God, am I tired of writing really long stories right now.
Yes, I've been there. Yes. Very nice, very nice. I like that. And I believe that was pretty much everyone. I read a few. Oh, let me see. My board Vigorous.
Greetings, everyone. So, like Mr. Drunken said, I'm gonna just slightly continue that. I have read what he has written so far. It's really good, and he's incredibly pissing me off that he's not putting it on the internet yet, because it's pretty much nearly done. And it's actually good, but he just keeps complaining that it's bad, even though I know it is very good. It's like a never-ending cycle with this guy, I swear to God. So, now to me. I have pretty much the same name on the internet as well. Just added a TVP at the end because for some reason somebody already took my name. I hate him, but whatever. You get what you get. What I'm currently writing, well, I have like one main story that is a original work. I've been working on it since like November last year. Actually, no, 2 years actually, so nearly like a year and a half almost. It's terribly slow. I'm gonna say that. It's already possible to hear it in my voice. I'm not American. I'm not from England either, so it's going very slowly for me. It's only like 25,000 words right now, and you know, with that long amount of time, you would think it would be larger, but it's not. Even though I've been pretty much working on it on and off every single day. So yeah, it's pain. Another thing that I'm currently doing actually, which I'm currently uploading actually. I'm just literally in the middle of trying to think of a blurb to like catch somebody's eye for it. So I'm gonna be posting that most likely today, which is also related to like a different game. That one is actually a fan fiction, this one. And yeah, I guess that's it. I just only have these 2 stories.
Very
Other
good.
than that, I've been helping out with other stories for other people, like Drunken. And yeah, that's it, I guess.
Quite nice, quite nice. Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate that. Well, that looks like that was everybody. I didn't see any new introductions. If there's anyone else that wants to introduce themselves that I may have missed, yeah, feel free to signal for me, and I'll see it on my side of my screen. But otherwise, let us move on. So, writer's block. This is the academic textbook definition. It's a period where a competent writer cannot produce new material, and academics do like to stress the competency part. Now, normally to define that, it's usually just a certain skill level, right? But I would ignore that part. The main points you need to be aware of is that it results in a decline in quality or quantity of work. Now, I know writers whose main job is not so much to produce high quality pieces themselves, but more smaller sets of works. For example, I don't know if most of you guys, if you've reading like those, what's what I'm looking for, like zines, maybe smaller indie periodicals on the internet, right? You have a lot of material that needs to be filled in a very short time span issue, and you'll find a lot of authors will take to that itself, right? Okay, I only have to crank out 500 to 750 words for this lower budget magazine. Multiply that by the 7 issues they commissioned me to do, and you can kind of see how you can work that out in sets, right? But even still, if you can't meet that deadline for quantity, or in another case, your quality is not where it should be, that could be classified as a writer's block as well. And it does affect all writers of all stages of the writing process, which is why I don't like this textbook definition all that much, because it's a bit contradictory. Where you have a quote, competent unquote writer, and then you have all stages of the writing process. Very, very tricky slope, but we'll talk about that much later. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. Please tell me if I'm speeding through. Not, we'll go right ahead. So these are some causes, and for the most part, I do agree with these. Physiological. Now, you're stressed, anxiety, physical illness. This will keep you from writing how you normally would, and will definitely decrease the quality of your work. Motivational. This is another slippery slope for me. Fear of evaluation or writing anxiety, which a lot of, not just writers, but artists themselves suffer with, as Vigorous and Drunken just demonstrated for us, right? Apparently Drunken's draft is very, very good to Vigorous, but I would argue there's probably some anxiety there about sharing it. Perhaps. And yes, cognitive. Perfectionism. Over-planning, right? And over-planning is the one that I tend to struggle with too, because I do like to run a tight narrative, and I don't like to, I don't like to leave plot points and storylines and threads untrimmed and not tightly wound up. So it does bother me sometimes when I read stories like that. So I try my hardest to just plan everything to a letter, to the T. And that can get in the way of the writing process. It can, right? Everything's a measured balance in writing. It is. And perfectionism and over-planning, I'd say is between this and motivational are probably tied for being the number one reasons why writers go through the blockage. And behavioral. So this is an interesting one. Now, higher academia will lump behavioral in with the other three as a possible symptom from them. But I disagree. I don't think that's true. These are purely from our missteps in writing. Now, let me say that again. Sorry about the animations. These three are, I'd say, the higher tiers of what would happen to you if you were to have writer's block, while behavioral is strictly from our own poor habits, I'll say. It just is, right? And this isn't to rag on anybody, because I have had many behavioral issues with writing as well. So, cardinal sins, I would call them. Speaking of which, it's a quick tangent, but does anybody know about the cardinal sins of writing? According to Hamilton University's Writing Center, these are the big no-nos in writing, and I 100% agree with them. Now, I'd be very curious if anybody could name one of them. There are 6. Don't know. Alright, well, so now take in mind this is from High University, but I do think they still apply. Number 1, they say, passive voice. So, using passive voice can make sentences less direct and harder to follow. For example, the ball was thrown by John is passive, whereas John threw the ball is active. And passive voice can work in stories, I would say, but you do want to be careful about that. You really do. Because sometimes it can kind of take away from the impact of whatever scene you're writing, if that makes any sense. Please tell me if it doesn't. Number 2 is, a huge one for all writers and all students. Incorrect punctuation of 2 independent clauses. This is one that even I have trouble with sometimes. even though I teach English, I get lazy and I forget. Failing to properly punctuate two independent clauses, it can lead to run-on sentences or a comma splices. For instance, I love to write. It's my passion. Oh, actually, I probably should type this out so you can see it. So I'll type this out in events really quick. I love to write, comma, it's my, what'd I do? I love to write, comma, it's my passion. Wait, here we go, like this. So this would be incorrect. This form that I sent would be incorrect, right? Where should the comma go? Or in fact, forget comma. Very good. And not even a comma. It actually should be. This is the correct form of it. I love to write. This is what kills my students and myself as well. Very good, Snake Eater. Excellent, excellent. Very good. Right. It's murder for writers. It is. And it's something that if I'm in a rush, right, I forget how to use them as well. As a good teacher should. As a good teacher should. And I've been trying to drill it into my students as well. Unfortunately, I'm noticing more and more in corporate settings that they're getting away from using that form. It seems that it's just not that much of a pressing problem anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, that would definitely happen to you. That would definitely happen to you. It's something that just general writing the public struggles with, right? It does. But for number 3, right, wordiness. Using too many words can dilute your message, right? For example, if you were to say a sentence like this, due to the fact that, right? Well, actually, I should probably write this out as well. That's really hard to say. This is a cardinal sin, right, in higher academia. Not so much, I would say not so much in writing. If this is a dialogue from somebody who is wordy by nature and vacuous, this could work, right? It's dialogue. But a research paper, if you are working on, MLA report, something like that, typically the professor might ding you. I don't in my class because, it's pretty much credit recovery. So I try to be a little more lenient, but it is something to watch out for in higher academia. Right? You could replace this whole little sentence here with just because. Right? But because is not going to get you to your word count. So if you can get away with it, I say do it. Now another one, misuse of apostrophes. All right. These are often misused in possessives and contractions. For example, I'm just going to write this in Notepad and then paste it over. Right. It's raining versus it's raining. Right. Here we go right here. And this really should be drilled in elementary, but I'm noticing that the kids that are being taken in from elementary school are not being drilled on this, which is very, very unfortunate. I would say that is a great disservice to them. Number 5, almost done. Missed place in dangling modifiers. Modifiers need to be placed next to the word they're intended to modify. Right? So if I were to... wish I could just copy my notes over instead of rewriting it, but let's see. Yeah, I will do it like this. Running quickly is a very good example. So, running quickly, the finish line. What am I missing? Running quickly, the finish line was crossed by the athlete, right? Right, you can, I'm sure most of you can tell me what's wrong with this sentence. Right, what's being incorrectly modified? I've given this exact same sentence. Say the athlete should be before the finish line. You're very correct, AP. Right? If you was to rewrite this, it would be running quickly, the athlete crossed the finish line. I'm a very slow typo. Quickly, the athlete crossed the finish line. Yes, you are correct. It is an example of active versus passive tense. That's funny you bring that up because that is, I'm going to have to put that into my curriculum. I don't think I've actually talked to the students yet about that. You'd be surprised, but that's not an issue I see most with people's writing as it comes across my desk. It's really these 6. And speaking of number 6, pronoun problems, right? I don't even think I need to write an example of these, but pronouns, they have to clearly refer to a specific noun, right? So, just for a verbal example, when the teacher gave the student his book, right? If you really think about that sentence, when the teacher gave the student his book, it's unclear whose book is being referred to, right? You really don't know. It can either be the teacher or be the student. Who's his? So, making sure your pronouns clearly refer to then a specific noun. Very, very important. These are the main ones, and I feel a little goofy because I didn't actually put them on the slide, but these are the main ones that not only do I see, but higher academia is still seeing. And we can talk about this for hours. That's a failure on just Common Core in the States and all of that. But I won't get into that today. A lecture for another day. Just kind of be aware of those. And if you want a list of them, I can get it to you guys after this lecture. Should have put it on. Yes, AP. My sentiment exactly. Oh my goodness. Awful. Anyhow, so on to the writing process, right? So Socrates once said, "Know thyself," and that quote has been attributed to many a philosopher and many an incorrect subject as well. Just very, very interesting, right? You would think it was self-explanatory, talking about knowing the limitations of what you can do and what you can affect, but I've heard all sorts of theories about that. But that's neither here nor there. The reason I bring that up is because in writing, right, dual thinking. Now, this is not a theory, and this is not something that I made up. This is very, very studied, and it's been kind of an interest of mine lately because it explains so much with the way that people, not just tackling writing itself, but how people tackle creative projects, and it's very, very interesting. So, convergent thinking, right? It's related to your critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. It involves a more logical, step-by-step approach to narrow down alternatives and reach conclusions, right? So, for convergent thinking, in my notes here, it's described as a cognitive process, which would have to be because you're thinking, right? The key attribute to this is people who rely heavily on logical analysis, right? And analyzing step-by-step reasoning to solve problems, your decision making, and not just problem solving in and of itself, but it's a very narrow focus on problem solving. I wouldn't say thinking outside the box. In fact, I'd say the exact opposite, right? Where it's a very strict, rigid, dogmatic approach to solving problems. For example, if I was to task you guys with sorting, let's say sorting a box of assorted Lego bricks, right? And for your guidance, right, I give you my recommendation on how to do that on a nice printed out PDF document, right? A convergent thinker would take that document as gospel and sort exactly like that, whether it was most efficient or not, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Then you have divergent thinking, right? It's a process strongly linked to creativity, involves ideational fluency, originality, flexibility, and elaboration. And elaboration is very important. I should have bolted that keyword because it's one thing to be creative, but you need to, well, I think, right, you should be able to, as an artist, whether written or whatever, not just elaborate on your work that you've produced, but have some conviction behind it. And that's really what elaboration is referring to, right? I'm sure many of you have seen or talked to somebody who's produced great work, but there's no conviction behind it, right? They're almost ashamed to have made it, even though it's very, very good, right? You need conviction as a artist in general. So many people you'll meet, right, can make great, great work, but they don't value it themselves. And I think that's a bit of a problem, if you ask me. You should be free and comfortable to value your work and not feel as if it's a transgression, if that makes any sense. Anyhow, more academic explanation is that it's about generating numerous ideas, exploring various solutions, and connecting your thoughts creatively. And for the most part, I do agree with this, right? I know this is a lot to be blasting at you guys. Are there any questions so far about dual thinking, convergent or otherwise? Well, there's a very fine line between pride and shame, I would argue. But yes, AP, the general sentiment is that. Oh, come on. Of course, Drunken. What have you to say to us?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to convergent versus divergent, would you say there's also like a distinction for those two groups between people that write extremely detailed drafts and plots and the ones that just kind of go with it just to make it?
Yes, I would definitely say that. So I was going to get into it, right, jumping the gun a little bit, but the point of these two schools of thought is not that people should be dividing themselves into separate camps. You need to use both to be effective, right? But most times, people naturally have an inclination to one or the other, right? There's no one that I've met or in studies I've read that have really been able to find somebody that splits outside of these two schools of thought, if that makes any sense, right? So naturally, you lean to one or the other. The point of this is that you should be using both, right? You need both, not just for creative projects, but for life in general and solving problems outside of how am I going to get this paragraph done that I've been working on for the last 5 weeks. If that makes any sense.
Right, that makes sense, guys. That would be more of a when to use it right.
Yes. Right. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you very much. And Snake Heater, I do see yours. We said, what if you use a form of thinking that doesn't conform to either of those? Feel free to, you can type out a little bit more of an elaboration, and I can come back to it and answer it. But just in what I've seen in studies I've read, I just have not seen anyone that wholly falls out of these two. Most I've seen that you can describe that are people that blend both very, very well, and you wouldn't think they're either one or the other, right? But I mean, this is going back to studies of neurology and how the brain works itself. That's where I pulled this out of. That's a very excellent question, Princey. How does one effectively determine what way of thinking to use at a time? Academia has not, they don't really have an answer for that, right? They have identified what both of them are, and right now the leading, I guess you could say, solution is that, okay, if I'm working on a project or I'm working on something that closely aligns to needing convergent thinking, maybe I should lean more heavily on that. And the example in the study that was cited was it was something about it was a group of college students, and they had 2 projects. What was that first project? It was a writing exercise. That's what I know. A technical writing exercise. So they were giving a list of non-fiction topics. I think it was a news story, and they were supposed to dissect the news article and pull whatever information out of it, right? Something that would obviously leverage convergent thinking, right? And that's kind of what the academics say, right? So they're saying that we should not. I don't want to slide anybody. They're saying that people should be more cognizant, right, of the 2 styles of thinking, and essentially just compartmentalize their daily tasks into what they are. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that's an awful approach to getting work done and life in general. That's very dumb. Right? I don't get up in the morning and say, I need to brush my teeth. Should I use convergent or divergent thinking for that? That's not the way to do things. The way to do it, right, I would say more holistically, is to be aware of what they are. And really, essentially, just besides being aware is, okay, when you sit down to actually do something that requires this level of higher thinking, right, you really just have to force yourself. That's kind of what I'm getting at. You really just have to force yourself into them. There's no set of exercises that you can do to call upon them. This is a very, very natural process, which is why it's not talked about much in writing in general. This is usually for neuroscience students, but I think it wholeheartedly applies to us as well. Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it, Princey. I mean, it is. But back to your earlier question, how do you force yourself to do that, right? Well, I say the way to force yourself to do that is to sit down and do those tasks that leverage that, right? If we're sitting down brainstorming ideas for a new business together, right? We're mainly going to be relying on divergent thinking naturally, right? We're not going to be, well, we might actually be using convergent thinking, but for the most part, we'll be leaning on number 2. So the best that I could say, right, is that you want to leverage one or the other. Well, force yourselves to do tasks that leverage one or the other. Okay, Snake Eats, I just read what you wrote. I don't know. I have several students that are like you, same kind of pitfalls in writing as well. I believe the correct term is neurodivergent, but even with the way they approach the assignments and everything, they still they still use one or the other or a blend of both. Right? Yes, it's an atypical way of thinking, and I think the thinking moniker might be throwing you off a little bit, right? It's not that dogmatic. It's just the best word that we can really assign to it. It's not like, okay, my brain only does this or my brain only does that, right? At all times of the day, you could be using one, the other, a mixture, 70% divergent, 30% convergent, 90% convergent, 10% divergent, right? There's no actual statistic we can put on it. But I would still argue that for the most part, everybody who has normal brain function is using these two interchangeably or relying on one or the other. Let me read that. So Nuke, my screen's a little dusty. He said, would you recommend a method or thought exercise to push yourself from one form of thinking to the other? How do you stop yourself from pigeonholing your way of thinking into one particular? That's a very, very good. That's a very good question. So the way that you would do that, at least the way I know, is really going through the writing process. So I'm going to come back to that. These two play a huge role in writing, as you can probably guess. For writing, convergent thinking, it plays the role for you drafting, revising, and editing those stages of writing, right? And it helps you organize your thoughts, make decisions about the way to express your ideas, and refine the work by focusing on, your coherence, clarity, and consistency. And Nuke, the reason that I just brought that up is because if you want an exercise to push yourself from one form of thinking to the other, at least for writing, it is going through the formal writing process itself. Because the formal writing process uses pretty much an even split of both, right? We are not going to be just heavily relying on one or the other. Even as you're drafting and trying to provide coherence and clarity, that's not just convergent thinking. That's also half divergent thinking, right? So say that you've been writing yourself along, you're about halfway through your novel, and you realize, oh my goodness, I've written myself into a corner essentially. How am I going to get out of this? So normally what you would do is retrace your steps in the narrative, convergent thinking, and then you would have to use divergent thinking to solve that problem. That's your exercise. Right? I'm not going to tell you to sit at your desk and breathe in and out for 30 seconds, anything like that. No. This comes down to actual, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say work, that's not a good word. Actual practice, I should say. Excellent questions. Are there any more before I move on? And if anyone wants to go back and look at this, this was penned in academic journals. It was late 2009 by Sarah J. Ahmed. I have the document somewhere. I'm not going to read it to you guys, of course, but it's a very interesting read. It really is. My only concern is that as more and more research is poured into this and developed, that what we have here will change drastically in the next few years. Well, it's been a few years, but in the next 10 or so, I'd say. There's been a very huge push into solving this creative slump situation. You wouldn't think about it, but a lot of money is being poured behind the scenes into research, and how can we not make people more creative, but I think more nefariously, how can we make them more productive, right? What tricks and levers can we pull to make the 9-to-5 office worker get more done in that 9 to 5 time period. Drunken, you said, why is that late night the best time to write? I do my best stuff and I'm most productive between 12 and 3 a.m. That's a very excellent question. For me, if I was going to answer the question, it's because I'm really, really busy, right? So you get up in the morning, you have to go to work, you get off work, right? Tired. By the time I get off work, I'm tired. I want to come home and usually either relax for a little bit, kind of unwind before I have to go right back and do other work that I have outside of my regular work. So by the time it gets to 11, 12, 3 o'clock in the morning, it's like, man, all right, I've got a little bit of free time. Let me try to crank out something in this very, very limited amount of time I have. For me, it's a kind of pressure, really. It's like, okay, right, I have to be at work at 7 in the morning. It's now 12. How much can I get done in like the next 40 minutes before I have to hop into bed? Something like that, right? At least for me. I'm sure the answer's different for everybody, but that's how I look at it. Same, Snake Eater. I get the best results like right before bed. Very good, very good. So now let's talk about the traditional stages of the writing process. All right. So first two are planning and drafting. So this planning, of course, is where the writer has to outline the framework and the key ideas of whatever they're writing. Now this is very formal, and I apologize for it, but this is the tried and true method for a reason. It works. It's academic and it can be somewhat stifling. Yes, I will concede, but you get real results. You really do. A lot of creative bottlenecks come from the lack of direction. All right. And you can quote me on that. A lot of creative bottlenecks, right? Writing yourself into a corner or whatever have you, come from the lack of direction. Sometimes the narrative that you've spun, let me rephrase that. Sorry. Sometimes the narrative is spun in a way that creativity is kind of an absence of order and direction, right? I just don't agree, right? I don't think that creativity should be bound or should be freed from order and direction, right? It's like this pure creature. No, if you want to be creative, right? Some of the best works of art were made with creative limits in place. Right? You don't want to be just wandering in the desert, right? Nothing for miles. I mean, if I say some of the best piece of art, but to take it back to my realm, right? I think of like some of my favorite books, especially video games. Oh my goodness, right? You go back to the NES and Super Nintendo era, right? There was a lot of real constraints for the time. But some of those games still hold up to this very day, right? Decades later. And that's because, right, limits in place can breed even more creativity than having the absence of it. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not just talking in circles. Yes, Princey. Yes, that's a story for another day, but very, very depressing. Anyhow, so it's a sentiment that I sort of agree with, but I don't like when it's blasted around as gospel, as I said. The creative things that we love, they weren't born from a vacuum, right? So imagine me throwing an amnesiac inside a locked cell and handing him a pad and pencil. Now I task him with writing the next great fantasy epic while he can't even recall his name. And the reason I bring this up is that you don't get some of these works of arts we have without being able to look back on what's been done before, right? You know, creativity is not just reaching into the abyss and pulling out an award-winning idea. It's okay to look to other sources and pull from what's been done before to craft something wholly transformative. Very good. Any question? No, it doesn't look like I did. Right. So I tell my students a lot that an excess of creativity and freedom, it can be just as limiting as having too much oversight and guardrails. You know, I mean, if I was to ask everybody here, right, what would you guys like for lunch after the workshop? I'm very, very positive that everyone would be waffling around like, well, I'm not sure. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? I know because this is what I go through with my coworkers every day at lunchtime. Right? So sometimes it's good to have direction. Well, no, I say all the time it's good to have direction and wee bit of oversight. Right? It's not there to harm you. Going through the traditional writing process, you're outlining, you're drafting, right? That's not a negative, I will argue. It's very, very good. And of course, drafting, right? You start putting ideas into sentences and paragraphs and fleshing out the details of your planned content. Now, there's two more, right? Well, people have like up to 8 steps, but I think 4 is pretty good. You have the revision stage, right? Where you review and rework your draft to improve its clarity, coherence, and overall effectiveness once more. And there's, of course, editing, right? Which is penned as the final stage. And, just going back and correcting your errors, punctuation, all that good stuff. So, I'll say it again. Organization is not your enemy. Oftentimes, when people dive headfirst into writing stories, they ended up having to come back and go through this process once they started hitting walls, right? So it's like, okay, I don't want to do this writing process. It's too limiting. It's going to waste too much time. Let me just write the story I have in my head. You get 10 chapters in and it's like, oh my goodness. All right. Where do I go from here? Well, where you go is back to step 1 of the writing process and do what you should have done in the beginning. Right. And now I understand if maybe, okay, I'm only writing like a 10K one shot or something. Do I really need an outline for that? No, you probably don't, right? Most likely you wouldn't. But if you plan to write like these full-length novels, 100,000 plus words, multi-chapters, you should be going through this formal writing process. You really should, because some of you have spent years working on your projects, right? Fan fiction, years spent on it. And you're still doing this as you go, right? That's very inefficient. And someone asked me way before this, like, hey, okay, you're drafting. What happens if the outline or draft changes, right? Well, what happens then? And we're going to get into this, not on this slide, but in another one further down that talks about that as well. So, tangible solutions. Actually solving writer's block, solving the problem. Now this will be very, very interesting. So you have 2 types of effective solutions that will be argued: targeted and soft. Now, the issue that I've run into with talking about writer's block with others is that most solutions are seen at best like obvious observations, and at worst, it's patronizing snake oil designed as a real solution to be sold to people. I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, so my stance on tangible solutions is that if you find something that works for you, that's all well and good. Though you want to really diagnose why you're in a slump, right? I tell my students that just because you don't feel like doing something, that doesn't mean that you're in a slump or going through writer's block. If a month goes by and you haven't penned anything, if you haven't written anything because you just don't feel like writing, or you're tired from work or whatever, that doesn't automatically mean you've got nothing left in your creative tank, right? It doesn't mean that you're having writer's block. You're probably just tired and need a break, right? You'll know it's a block because you'll come back after that period of time and not be able to get anything done, right? Not be able to write even a sentence. That's when you know it's writer's block. Because there's been times when I've just been busy with work. I don't have time to write, right? Lesson planning, whatever. And like weeks go by, I haven't written anything. but I come back and I'm able to pick up right where I left off, right? That's not writer's block because I didn't write anything for a month. It's writer's block when you come back after 2 weeks or whatever, or the next day, and then boom, like that, I'm stuck. I can't even finish this dialogue sequence, right? And once you know it's a block, you have to start playing detective to figure out why, right? If it can be directly linked to something, then attack the problem from that angle. That's what I would say. If it can't be figured out, then you're going to be playing self-psychologist to figure out why, which isn't all that fun for me. You know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's where I'd say the soft solutions come in. Those are strategies to minimize writer's block, right? Academics are moving towards calling these methods, I think, self-care or something like that. And, you know, they're not wrong, but it's the kind of eye-roll inducing thing a grad student is trying to push as the next big breakthrough. But that's neither here nor there. Sometimes higher education really just annoys me with what goes on. So soft solutions, those are for you to try to minimize writer's block, you know, stuff like taking a break when you're on a schedule. That's very important. I forgot to mention that. Taking a break when you're on a schedule. Oh my goodness. I have been telling people all the time, like, if you want to get into writing, you really should carve out some dedicated time. If you can, I know everyone can't, but if you can, carve out some time for it on a set schedule. That's very good, right? Train yourself. Okay, it's 6:05, right? I'm done with dinner. This is the time that I'm going to write for 30 minutes, or whatever, something like that, right? Having a schedule is very, very important. Let me pause that. Nuke, let me read that. You said, how do you deal with a block stemming from a fundamental fear of messing up or a looming feeling that whatever you write next will not be anywhere near as good as what you were capable of before? Aside from just sitting down and doing the thing. All right, well, you're not going to like my answer, but academia will tell you that the way you circumvent that is that essentially you address those psychological issues first. They would say, okay, well, what is this stemming for, right? Maybe you should be seeing someone to figure out why you're feeling like this, right? I can't afford therapy, so for me and for most that I tell, a lot of times it's the hump that we have to get over ourselves. You really have to sit down and just do the thing, right? Because you can say for the next 10 years, right, then what I'm going to write is just not going to be as good as what I've done before. But now 10 years have gone by and you've done nothing, right? A lot of this really comes down to discipline, and that's what writing is, right? Most hobbies, right? Most people that are successful at hobbies, right? They treat it as a discipline. That's just how it is, right? It's a regimen. It's something that they take serious to a certain point, right? And like I said, I know that's not a very satisfactory answer, just sitting down doing the thing, but it is the truth at the end of the day, right? I don't want to mislead anybody and sell you snake oil, but there's no magic bullet for coming over our own personal insecurities and whatnot. And it really does come down to, okay, am I going to write or am I not going to write? Very well said, Snake Eater. You really do need to, I said in an earlier slide, but play self-psychologist sometimes. No, thank you for the question. I really do appreciate it, Nuke. And it's just a real discussion, right? And it's unfortunate that a lot of creative writing teachers and higher academia, they don't really get to the root of these issues, right? They don't want to talk about that angle because, well, if they did, you might not want to take the class anymore, right? You'd be like, okay, what am I doing here for? And it's also a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to rag on higher education, but a bit of pandering, I've noticed, right? Like I said, I only work at a community college, but I notice a lot of times with our students, there's a lot of pandering that the boards will do. And we're really not doing them a service if we are ignoring some of these glaring issues with the performance and work. Yes, and that's, oh my goodness, you're getting, don't get me started on that. Wasn't paid to provide feedback on your essay. Yeah, I hate that so much, right? Because you gotta remember, like most professors in their fields, they're in those positions because they're working on research, right? Professors are researchers, typically, right? They're not your normal teacher. So to them, I'm working at this university not to teach a class, but to further my own research, right? But to us, or to whoever's a student, like, hey, I'm taking this class to learn something, right? And I've always hated that disconnect. I really have. I really have. Yes, my middle schoolers, they've a few times they've done that, but it's okay. I still make the homework do anyway. I don't know what college it was, but that's an issue that you probably could have argued with your academic board. As teachers, professors, whatever, in those positions, right, you are supposed to. They have to provide feedback and reasoning behind a low grade, right? And if they don't, that can be brought up to the academic board, and they can do their own investigation and essentially force him to, right? Because whether he's a researcher or not, he is still there for a responsibility, which is his charges and his students. But always unfortunate. But for and off my little soapbox, for targeted solutions, I think I did skip this one. It's really just getting to the root of the issue, the specific cause of the block. The example I gave was that rent's due, and the stress of the upcoming payment is throwing you off your normal groove, right? Hey, pay your rent, and if you go back, feeling fine and can write, well, there you know, right? That was your targeted solution. And for soft solutions, the one that I did actually like from this paper I read was to engage in tangential creative activities, right? And that's just doing other creative things that will still stimulate that part of your mind, right? So if you're having trouble writing your work, right, working on your other creative hobbies, maybe painting instead, or I saw one that I liked something about like building the scene out with Lego bricks, which, as I've said, I'm a huge Lego fanatic. I really love that idea. Great, keeps you still thinking about, right, what you're working on, but it lets your mind kind of wander in a different direction. Yeah, essentially, right. That's pretty much what it boils down to, Princey. But it's amazing, because I've had students come to me at the college and tell me how just if this is talked about at all in their writing class or their English class or whatever, right? It's stretched out over weeks and weeks and weeks, when it could really just be a normal discussion had a day in class. It's very funny how some professors will just really, really stretch out that 14 weeks. Very good, Snake Eater. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I like that. So, on to the next slide. Okay, so good organization, right? And this quote, it just slippery slope for me. Don't make your hobby work. All right, and I agree, and I also disagree. Because man, a lot of times I've seen this quote, or people say something on this lines like, don't make your hobby work. It stems from a lack of organization, which is still making it work, right? It's like, okay, I jumped headfirst into my story. I didn't do any planning beforehand. Now I'm 12 chapters in, and it's like a chore to write now. And then you tell somebody else, hey man, you have to be careful. Don't make your hobby work, but you don't realize why it became work in the first place. You created the extra work, right? You created the extra work for yourself. And this is not a slight against anybody, right? I'm not saying I saw this here or whatever, but I'm just saying this is a sentiment I see so much, right? And it's always usually from someone who's just so far into the project, but they're having trouble. And it's like they don't want to go back and kind of work on this organizational part because they have a fear that if I go back, I'm probably going to unearth a lot that needs to be redone. And that's a strong fear for a lot of writers. Man, I'm halfway through. If I go back now to try to fix this part of the story, I may end up having to rewrite most of my draft. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And it's hard, right? Like, I had someone that I was in school with, in English 231, which is like world literature from across the ages or whatever, something like that. Or it's literature history from ancient world, whatever. Anyways, point being that we had a semester long, I don't want to say story, but we were essentially supposed to create our own historically framed draft, right? So he chose to base his off of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Very, very good, but if anyone's read it, it's kind of dense and a little difficult to understand. So it's a very slow going piece to base your own assignment off of. So, oh my goodness, we were almost done. We were like 4 weeks out from this being done, and man, we were reading it one day at a table session, and I was like, I hate to tell you this, my friend, but I don't think you're gonna get a good grade on this. As you get further into your epic, right, the narrative starts falling apart. Like, what does your outline look like? And he tells me 12 weeks later, no outline, no organization, no anything. And I'm like, oh my God, my heart goes out to you, my friend, but you gotta go back. You gotta go back and clean this up. So yeah, he barely made it in. It was like 3.5 weeks writing right up on deadline. He went back and pretty much rewrote the entire thing, right? And it was unnecessary. Right? But like I said, this kind of organization, it scares some people because they think that I'm not a professional. Why am I going to be making outlines and drafting and doing all this kind of extra work? It's not extra work if it helps you be more efficient. If that makes any sense. It's not extra work if it helps you be more efficient and cut down on writer's block and all the time spent not writing anything because you're just stuck. Oh wait, I think I missed some questions. Did I miss some questions? WT, I see you said, I struggle with this because I cannot plan because I never really know where I want a story to go until I start writing. Oh, okay, I follow along. I don't know why I had to read that a few times. Yeah, this is a common sentiment I hear as well, right? It's like, okay, teacher, like, how am I going to make an outline for a story that how am I going to make an outline for a story that I don't even know how it's going to end yet? Right. And my answer to that is usually, well, instead of spending the time writing it and getting stuck later, I really genuinely do think that what you should do formally, what I would have my students do is, okay, I would have them sit down with me and say, okay, just basics, very, very high level bird's eye view. What is your story? Because you do know what your story is, right? You do know what it is to a degree, because you're not just going to get in front of the keyboard, mind empty, and all of a sudden you hit the space bar and the words just start magically coming out. No, you have something in your mind, right? You may not be able to put it on a formal outline, but you have something in your mind that we can actually talk about. So it would be, okay, well, what do you want to do, all right? Just very, very high level, right? What is the story about? And you could say about a bank robbery or romance between a man and his coworker, right? Okay, boom. That's something that we can work with, right? There's something there. Then, little bit by little bit, we start peeling layers back. Okay, you said bank robbery. All right, so is it a crew? Is it one man? You would say, okay, it's a crew. Okay, a crew of how many? Crew of 3. All right, who are these 3? Are they friends? Are they strangers? Friends, and then we can start going from there. And once we have more details down, then that can be formulated into a formal outline, right? But you will have something in your mind before you start writing. Always do. Always do. People don't think they do, but you do. Any other questions? I don't want to keep rambling on. I would definitely read that. Excellent question. How do you prepare and organize the in-between parts of your story? Excuse me, is my looking over here just making sure this is still recording? That's an excellent point. The way that at least I do it in our class is you really do have for some people to go baby steps, right? So, I don't have my draft pulled up. I should have actually attached it. I'm sorry. But you have your beginning and your ending defined, right? From your beginning to your middle, right? The middle is the part, like you said, no one's really going to know too much what goes on in. Don't worry about what goes on in the in-between. You need to be working from beginning onwards. So, doing that baby layer step, right? Because if you're right, if you have your beginning and your ending defined, and you're worrying about what to fill in the middle, right, you're going to lose focus, right? Writing, as I told my students, try not to, as you're actually doing the actual writing, try not to have such a high level overview of what's going on, right? You need to work from scene to scene, action to action. So you say you have your beginning and ending defined, right? Well, forget the ending. Start at the beginning, right? From there. Don't have the ending in mind. Have an end goal in mind, right? Right? So, I guess that's a little too similar, but for example, if we go with the Ocean's 11 story, right? Beginning, all right, the crew gets together, whatever. Ending, right? They retire at the Bahamas. No, that's bad ending, right? Your ending should be an ending goal or idea, right? Not that they retire at the Bahamas or whatever, but higher than that, they get away with the heist. If that makes any sense, right? So keep your defined beginning if you want that, right? Crew gets together. But your ending should be a goal. Because what if they don't go to the Bahamas, right? What if as you're writing, you decide that, maybe that instead of them all going together there, they go their separate ways, whatever, right? That might change. Yes, thank you. It says M on my screen, but, it is M. That's weird. Thank you very much. That is essentially what you want to do. Have a higher goal. Because being successful can mean a lot of different things, right? Very good. Did I miss anything else? Sorry, I had this squished over here into the side of the screen. It doesn't look like I missed anything else. Oh, interesting. Alright, so to talk more about the slides, since I haven't even said anything about it. Organization, it's there to help you. What more is it to say? It's there to help you, right? It can also boost your confidence and motivation as a writer. Yes, it can. By outlining your main ideas and goals, you have a clear direction and focus for your writing, right? And you can avoid getting lost or confused along the way. You're not going into uncharted territory, right? You have a rough map at the very least. You can also tailor your writing to suit the needs and expectations of your intended readers, and make sure that you're addressing their questions and concerns, right? And the reason I added that is it comes from higher academia, but it's also true here as well. Now, the next slide, we're going to talk about accountability, but as a preface, I don't recommend using your followers and whoever's like commenting on your story as accountability parties. And I'll explain why later, so just put a pin in that thought. Organization can also help you save time and energy. It really does, right? You can. I also would argue it reduces stress and frustration because by having a plan and a schedule for your writing, you can avoid procrastination and distractions, right? And you can make the most of your available writing time. Think about it. So you take writer A, who's diving headfirst into an original story, right? They just have the idea in their mind. They want to get right to writing it, okay? Then writer B, who's taken the time to essentially have a very, very rough outline of what they want that story to look like. I promise you over I'd say a month, right? Over a month, writer B will be further along than writer A. Even if writer B and A, well, even if writer B started his outline when writer A started just going into the story, writer B is going to be further along because when it comes time for him to write, he pulls up his outline, he sees, okay, this is what my goal was, this is what I want to do, all right, okay, I can work from this, right? Writer A, he may get very far along, right? He may get very, very far along to like, several chapters in, and then boom, he's stuck in a month. I promise you, he's stuck somewhere in that month, right? And then he's stuck, because then you have to go back to the writing process. And everyone does it, right? Whether you follow the writing process or not, once you get stuck, we instinctively go back, okay, how do I problem solve this, where I've written myself into? Everyone does it, right? And while writer A is problem solving, writer B is just writing. He's just writing. If he gets stuck, right? Okay, well, I go back to my outline. Maybe I need to change something on my outline, which happens. It happens to me. It happens to lots. But for the most part, he's doing mostly writing, right? That's very, very important. We want to write. So yes, want to avoid procrastination, and this also helps you streamline the writing process and avoid unnecessary revisions and edits, right? You don't want to be caught in revision hell. You really don't, right? It's not a great place to be. Very awful. Just changing, just like and the funny thing about just being caught in that limbo of just always editing, always revising, right? You have no direction or goal in mind. Right? You know that something's wrong, but you don't know what that wrongness is because there's no outline to refer back to. What are you referring back to? You don't know what's incorrect, right? You just know something's off. Something's not right. All right. So that's I will always advocate for that all day, every day. And of course, it can help you produce a better quality of work in less time, as I said. And, it can also help you free up time for other activities or projects, right? So if writer A is taking 2 hours to get through the same amount of work that writer B is taking an hour to do with his outline, right? Writer B has an extra hour to do something else. Or keep writing if he wants to, right? It's good. It's good. In organization, I'll say I argue that it can enhance your creativity and originality by making your writing more enjoyable and rewarding, right? When you're organizing, you're not limited or restricting your imagination, but rather creating a framework and a foundation for your ideas to flourish. You can use various organizational techniques, brainstorming, mind mapping, free writing, outline, whatever, to generate and explore different possibilities for your writing and to find connections and patterns among your ideas. That's very, very important right there, right? You can also use organization to create a balance and a nice little contrast between your ideas too, to add variety and some interest there, right? It's very good stuff. People tell me like they can't follow this type of organization because it slows them down or, insert whatever that they have going on. But I argue that this is the most beneficial. This is how you want to approach things. So, right, my main points, outlines, great. Milestone tracking, I think this is very important as well. I don't know too many people that do this because our word processors keep track of how many words you've written, but I'm specifically talking about a log, right? Because a lot of times as you're writing, right, months go by as you're working on whatever project you have, and you can feel like I haven't gone anywhere. Well, if you have a log, like, okay, this week or these 2 weeks, I did what 1,500 words, or this next set of 2 weeks, I did 3,000 or whatever, right? That's some tangible progress you can see. And I think it's really good. I think it's great, honestly. And schedule, right? Everyone's busy, right? Schedule may be feasible for some or not for others, but I strongly encourage you to have a schedule, to carve out some time for writing, right? Because I noticed that when you're spontaneous with writing, it's not sustainable, right? It's really not. Well, at least I don't think it is, right? Because you could have just an awesome burst of creativity one day, like, man, I'm writing. It's been 5 hours, I haven't stopped. I feel amazing. And then 3 days from then, like, you're stuck, right? You're just writing over and over again. So, schedule. Very, very important. Any questions, comments so far about this slide before I move on? If so, you can just type it and ping me. I will see them as I'm looking now. Yes, a drunken, I just saw your point. That's actually very good. So, that I think asking the why of things solves a lot of plot issues and corners before it happens, because there is a natural progression of the story logic. It's a very, very good point. Right. Excellent. If you don't know why events are happening in your story, your readers will not know why either. Right? They won't. Right? And whether they bring it up or not, they're still going to have the same questions you will have. Right? If you have questions, they will have probably twice as many, I would say. Right? So if it's like, I wonder if this is a good sequence to go with. I wonder if this makes sense, right? If you're thinking that at all, if you're just thinking if this will make sense, they're probably thinking that and some. So, excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, so accountability. All right. Very, very interesting. Or not interesting, I should say, but very, very pertinent. As I said earlier, writing is a discipline first and a hobby second, I would argue. It's a necessary skill that you have to hone and develop to stay an effective communicator. And unlike more visual mediums, it has a longer lead time with a smaller return on investment, if that's something you track. My point is that this is a marathon and not a race. A lot, if not almost everyone here, is writing what equates to full-length novels. And that not only takes time, it takes dedication, and it takes a certain level of discipline to see it through. An effective strategy for finishing and finishing strong is to have someone other than yourself to hold you accountable, right? This accountability person is usually designated as the readers of your story, and I don't put a lot of stock in this, if I'm being honest. No, don't get me wrong, right? Readers, they can and do offer valuable critique, and they're great, right, for feedback, but they are notoriously not effective at keeping a writer honest, if you will, or keeping them on their craft, right? Because I'm sure that this sounds very familiar, but there's been probably plenty of incomplete stories you guys have read over the years, right? Tons and tons of comments like, hey, is this being updated? Are they coming back? Like, what's going on? And no amount of, commenting on the person's story is going to keep them accountable, right? That's a little bit more of a lower level issue, because it's very easy to ignore those comments when they're so detached, right? I think that's what the Viper's Pit is and could be, but just more involved, right? I had a student recently ask me why we need to take creative writing so seriously, right? Like, why is this class important? If it's supposed to be just a fun hobby. And my answer to him was that he needs to take it seriously because he needs his English credit if he wants to move on to the next set of classes. But truth be told, it was a fair question. And the real answer is that you take your hobby serious so it can be fun, right? And I live and die by that. You take your hobby serious so it can be fun. Rules are in place to facilitate fun. You know, you also hear the argument against formalizing parts of your hobby because, again, I don't want to make this a job, right? But that's not the outlook you should have. It's really not. Oh, man. And people think that this stuff creates more work for yourself. It really doesn't. It really does not, right? The more efficient you are, the more well prepared you are, I don't want to say easier, but the easier of a time you'll have going through this, right? And I tell my students all the time, whether middle school or in community college, it's very, very important to have organization in what you do, right? You don't want to lose sight of that because especially when you are in a position where, okay, I'm kind of like I'm running up against the edge of a deadline or this work, whatever you want to call it, is important. You don't want to fall into that trap. At any rate, so feedback and encouragement. All right. Now, I've been calling it professional accountability, and what I mean by professional, I mean you guys, right? I'm talking about you as authors, aspiring authors, whatever you want to call it. We should be the ones keeping ourselves honest, right? And I have seen that here, right? I've seen people checking up on others' drafts, like, hey, how's this coming along, right? But ideally, we should do more, right? And that's another reason, like, I really want to start doing these monthly workshops because I think this is a great opportunity for us to really put this into practice. Because it's very hard when you don't have that group or network to reach out to. It's very difficult. That I'll concede. But if you do have it, like you guys do here, then take advantage. Really, take advantage of it. I mean, it's you guys. Some of you guys just don't realize how great of an asset that is, right? I know professional writers. I have I don't know if anybody knows who Gene Park is, but he's a good contact of mine, the Wall Street Journal writer for video games, and he's told me, like, man, right? I wish, he says, I don't want to misquote him, but he says that, like, he really does wish that this kind of community and collaboration, right, of writers was stronger, because for the most part, writers don't talk to other writers. We really don't, right? It's a very solitary hobby, right? You're not going to the club to meet with several other writers. Typically, it's very, very what's what I'm looking for? Individual, right? You sit in front of your computer screen, your laptop, and you work on your draft. So unless it's something that's collaborative, but for the most part, it's a solo affair. And it doesn't have to be, right? Even though we're working on different individual things, it doesn't have to be. Now, let me continue on. I don't want to ramble on for you guys. I'm sorry. I know it's late for some of you. Professional accountability, right? It provides writers with feedback and encouragement from their peers, mentors, editors, whatever you want to say. This definitely helps you improve your writing skills. I argue it'll help you gain confidence and overcome that self-doubt, right? If another professional in my field is critiquing me and telling me what I have is workable and is not awful like how I believe, then that helps me to be more effective. That helps me to realize and put things into perspective, like, hey, he's doing the same thing I'm doing. We know we have a similar skill set, right? So I can put more stock in his words. It's different than someone leaving a comment and saying how much of a good writer you are. Even though it's a very nice comment, right? You may not really believe it on the inside because it's just, some random on the internet. But, right, you're talking to people here who also write, do the same thing you do, that's a lot more weighted of an opinion. Commitment and responsibility. So, professional accountability can also create a sense of commitment and responsibility for writers, of course. You may feel more motivated to finish your project, meet your deadlines, and achieve your goals when you know that someone else is expecting you to do so, right? And I'm not talking about your readers and your followers. I'm talking about other professionals, us. And of course, community and collaboration, right? This fosters a sense of that among writers, and it gives us a space where we can share with other writers our ideas, our challenges, and our successes with others, and learn from them too, right? It's very important to share the success stories, right, as well as the challenges. We don't want this to be a moaning fest, because people here are doing good work, very good work. Yes, we got a community. We have that much at least. We can work on the professionalism, but we've got the community. Very good, AP. So, and where was my slide? And that is almost it. So, this is the show and tell portion of everything, and if anybody would like to show what homework they did and talk to us about the draft, they are more than welcome to. Or if you have to leave, right, I won't hold you any longer. I know this has been a very, very long lecture. I'm quite sorry, but it's something I'm very passionate about, and I love doing this. So, anyone would love to go first? I would hate to have to call on someone on a Saturday.
Alright, let me pull up my worksheet here. Alright. Second to load. I swear I did my homework. Logate it. Alright, yeah, so, I don't know, what part should I start with first? Just go down the list? Characters? Plot?
I would actually start with the plot, go to the setting, okay, and then characters, if you feel so inclined, please.
Okay, the plot. So, the story? I don't know. The story that I did my homework assignment on was Vipers, Knights, and French Fries. In hindsight, I probably should have done it with the Kobold story, because that one's actually finished, and I could not really spoil things. With this, major spoilers, I'm gonna try to avoid spoiling things, but a heads up, I might spoil something accidentally. But yeah, so the plot, I guess I'll just read what I wrote. Yeah, my story, it's not necessarily like the way that I was viewing it, because I was working on sort of like developing a better like conception, a better like visual of the plot in my head. You know, I'm a scientist, I like charts, so I was essentially making plot charts. You saw these, Jeeve.
Yes, I did.
But in my head, the way I was sort of conceiving of my plot was essentially there's two sort of plot lines. There's like the story's plot line, and then there's sort of like the relationship plot line between Vince and Tay. They both have their own like sort of shape and arcs, but they also intersect, so it's not like they're two separate plot lines, because it's one story. So, the events that happen along both of these different arcs are happening sort of at different times, but their climaxes would inevitably be the same, just to help with the visual. But yeah, I'll just read what I wrote. So yeah, the first conflict is with Tay, and this is from the perspective of the main character, of course, because it's first person. Vince, which is the main character, if you haven't read this, works with her every day and has to deal with her, has to find a way to deal with her. And for the earlier parts of this story, she's functionally an antagonist. She is basically his enemy. I mean, there's no other way to put it other than that. But also at the same time, it will be the eventual love interest. So I kind of ended up doing this with my dragon story a little bit, where like the love interest is also the antagonist at the beginning. I don't know. I don't know if that's really been. I mean, surely it's been done before, but I feel like it's kind of a weird way of doing things. But I kind of like how it's developing so far. I'm working on the 6th chapter right now. I'm a little bit ways in. But Vince basically suspects that she is a black site worker, if you don't know what that is in XCOM. It's essentially he thinks she's a war criminal because he heard rumors. But there was one part where she was nice to him when he got burned at work. So he knows she isn't a complete asshole. So like she's an antagonist, but to him there's a quality of like redeemability. So he doesn't really know how to deal with her basically, because he's like initially he's like trying to be nice to her despite how much of an asshole she's being to him, and then she essentially rips his heart out after he gets burned and spits on it, and so then he's kind of like, I have to destroy this chick, I have to annihilate her. And that's sort of what's going on right now, is there's like a small little arc of them really like duking it out and getting angry at each other. And then of course, like I was saying with that arc, their boss has directly pit them against one another. There's no one else participating in this contest except for them. And eventually this fighting is gonna, come to a climax. I'm not gonna read the rest because spoilers, but eventually this sort of them duking it out will come to a climax, and then their sort of way they view each other is gonna shift to be different.
Very good.
Yeah. And then of course the conflict for the main story I can't really talk about because that's also like spoilers. But from hatred to love, exactly. But I did this with Advent Provides a little bit, where spoilers for that, where basically like you sort of start off with a story and you like really develop the characters and you get them like you really get the readers to intimately know the characters, and you really like build up these characters like interpersonal relationships, and then once like the reader is like really invested in these characters, you throw a fucking like wrench in their life, you throw like a nuclear bomb at them, like it really I think I conflict that much more like invested. And like, yeah, McDonald's. Like I really like having like these normal characters and then just like throwing them into what essentially is like impossible odds. In the case of Advent Provides, the characters had to essentially face an overwhelming authoritarian government and an agent from that government that had them, at least had Lucas by the balls. So, yeah, that's fun. Alright, a lot done. What was the next thing you wanted me to talk about? What should I do next?
You did you talk about the setting?
I did not talk about the setting, good point. Let me see here. There it is. Yeah. So, yeah. It takes place in the Advent world after the events of XCOM 2, in a city-state that is located in the US. This isn't really spoilers. I mean, if you know what Portillo's is, you'd know that it takes place where Chicago used to be. I haven't directly mentioned that in the story, but I've dropped many, many hints that it's basically just Chicago. I don't know if Chicago was blown up in the XCOM lore. I'm assuming it still exists. If it doesn't, alternate universe, maybe, I guess.
That's very interesting, because my XCOM fic also takes place in Chicago. I might have to change that. That's very funny. That's funny.
Why not? I mean, it's a big city. I will say, Advent Provides, spoilers for that, I put fucking, like, so many My Name is Earl references in that. It was kind of a joke. It started off as a joke, and then I did it so much that it ended up becoming an essential part to the story. like, the first one actually takes place somewhere in New Mexico. I never really specified. I also put a Breaking Bad reference in it too because it was in New Mexico. But besides, that's aside. But yeah, this one takes place in Chicago. Let me see here. Yeah. The environment that this city-state exists in is rocky. Things aren't great, but most of the rebuilding after the war against Advent is pretty much finished by this point. People have regular access to food. I mean, that is sort of very clearly shown that they're not like starving because there's a fast food joint that the main character's working at. Yeah, let me see it. Yeah, the city, preemptively before the war, allied itself with anyone that was willing to fight against Advent, making deals with these shady organizations. This isn't lore that was, like, in the game, per se, but this is sort of how I imagined things would work out post, Advent. But, these gangs that had formed, or had already been present before Advent arrived, they sort of raised their strength by smuggling resistance supplies and other contraband in and out of the city. So you essentially have these like gangs and these, warlordism, basically, where like these gangs sort of during Advent's ruling they gained power that they wouldn't have had if Advent hadn't arrived because there was contraband and resistance supplies to smuggle and people were paying them for it through. I mean, obviously they have credits and shit, but I sort of imagined in my head that they would be trading like gold and silver, maybe Illyrium or like other valuable resources, sort of like bartering, I guess, so that the government wouldn't find out that they were trading credits between each other or something. With the war over, the deals made were obviously honored because the people that fought against Advent, these gangs and shit, were the, like, powerhouses. They were the resistance in the city. So, like, if they didn't honor those deals, the city would have just ripped itself apart. But it's kind of doing that a little bit now, sort of with some of the hints that I've been putting into the story. But basically, the deals that were made were honored post-Advent, and these gangs were granted, and organizations were granted a lot of power. And some individuals within these gangs, leaders, were even granted seats at the table in the new city government. And so, I've essentially set up Chicago mafia gang style the way it used to be before RICO laws, essentially, but kind of worse. I did develop the XCOM, like what XCOM's doing, sort of post-Advent. But basically, the way I imagined what XCOM would do is they sort of have a federalized and stable territory, but they can't police the whole world because, in the game you experience this a lot where they're building their army tall. You're not necessarily building a wide army, you're building like an army of like super mech soldiers, and you have like 20 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of what I imagined personally. They don't have like this huge like volunteer force of guys that they can just send out. They have like maybe thousands and thousands of guys that they could send out. Yeah, Brotherhood of Steel, exactly. That's exactly what I sort of was picturing in my head. They have like bases filled with these really OP guys, but they can't like police the world. I mean, they're trying to now. Like, this story takes place a little bit after the war with Advent was finished. They've had some time to sort of like try to build up more of a wider army, but they're still like mainly tall. But because the purposes of striking valuable Advent targets, it's going to be a long time before they become strong enough and have like a big enough presence to really be able to unite the world, I guess. And then I added another note, which I was thinking along the lines of, like, who says these people would want to be united? I mean, you have to think about what Advent did to all these fuckers on the planet. I mean,
Yeah.
they were literally melting them down into goo. Like, I mean,
Shit.
I guarantee you, nobody wants another world government. Like, nobody would want that. So, like, XCOM would be aware of that, and they're not trying to be, like, the new global overlords. What I've imagined is that they've essentially established a presence on like every continent, and they're essentially trying to be around in case because I mean there's still aliens running around in the world, presumably. They're not like all dead, and they're still like I mean then there's the sort of incorporation of aliens into society and stuff too that XCOM is overseeing. But yeah, I mean suffice it to say, they own territory in all continents. They have a presence. I sort of imagined personally that their biggest presence would be concentrated in Europe and the southern US, mainly because that's where a lot of manufacturing is. I would like to think, probably in China too, maybe. Just places where there's a lot of industrialization that they can take advantage of, because I mean they get their pick of the litter after the war. I mean they can pick to set up wherever they want, so they would obviously be setting up in urban areas that have a lot of access to resources and industrial infrastructure. But yeah, that is to say, like I've really like developed sort of a perspective on the wider world, but the main character's world is like very small. I mean, if you've read the story, you know that his life is working at a fast food joint and then going home and gaming. I mean, and going to the mall and experience like life in the city generally, but like his world compared to the settings world is like very small. But I think
no, that's a good thing. No, I was gonna say that's a very good thing, right? Because that's how it is for most of us, right? When we leave here, we're not going on grand adventures outside. What we go through day to day is very, very small scale, but I mean, in our world, what's going on right now? We have conflicts all over the world, right? International trade is being disruptive, all these major events. But when you really break it down to us, we live a pretty modest and small life. And I like that very much because little context about the world bleeds out as they go along, right? Through maybe news snippets or conversations, and you get a sense of the world's actual scale that way. It's a very, very tried and true approach to world building. One that I love very much myself.
Yeah, I really like to do it sort of like slowly and organically. Like, I mean, you talked a lot about earlier about like establishing a plan. I do that, but like as far as like world building goes, I don't really think about it in too much detail until it comes up, like in conversation, because I'm not trying to like do like lore dumps. It's kind of a way to like handicap myself so I don't do lore dumps, is by not actually having lore to dump until it comes up. That's sort of a trick I've used. But yeah, like something I've tried to do with these fanfics and the Kobold story as well is like, you don't necessarily have to have like this big crazy like the main character doesn't have to be like the chosen one who's like defeating the greatest evil in the world. I mean, you can write a story about a shoemaker. You can write a story about a fast food worker. It's challenging, of course, to keep things interesting, but I think that's why I've sort of been drawn to writing stories like that lately, is like having like the opening be very like simple and not like crazy, and then like developing that further and having something crazy happen to them later on. Yeah.
It's very good. That's very
the
good.
setting.
and for No, go ahead. Excuse me. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say what's next, so go ahead.
We don't have to touch upon all of them today. The only other one, maybe, is probably conflict. I think theme might fit for a longer lecture, but the conflict, which you did kind of touch upon, is between them. It's more small scale, so you pretty much hit every nail on the head. It was very nice. Thank you for sharing.
Sweet.
Is there anything else you want to talk about, though? I don't want to cut you off too early.
The thing I wrote in the conflict, I talked about the conflict a lot in the plot, because I mean conflict is plot. The only thing I really wrote in the conflict section was that, I mean, there's sort of like an external and an internal conflict. I mean, the main character, he's obviously lonely. He hates his job. He's being forced to work with somebody he doesn't like at a job he doesn't like, which I think is pretty relatable for most people, probably
Yes.
like 80% of the population.
Very much so.
And it's just like, you know, he's sort of having to deal with his own feelings about his job and his job as well. I mean, almost any conflict, there's probably some there's internal factors and external factors as well. But yeah, I mean, the conflict section I didn't really write a whole lot because, like I said, I already went over it. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything. Does anyone have any questions for me? I guess before I finish up here. I did see Nuke ask me about the wider setting. I might explore the wider setting. Yeah, I did see that. It's the thing with fan fiction. I do like the XCOM setting mainly because I like the games, but the setting itself is really interesting. It lets you do a lot of like in Advent Provides, especially. I got a really cool idea where I was like, you know, what can you like? We see a lot of VIPs and stuff in XCOM 2 and in XCOM EU. And we never really get like an idea of like what they do, like what are they going through, you know? It's probably like pretty safe to imagine like they're just like got brain chips or whatever. But I mean, I sort of wanted to explore it in like, oh, what, like maybe these VIPs are like more multifaceted. Maybe they've got, you know, something going on. I hadn't really seen because I had read a bunch of stories to get an idea of like, you know, what people liked, you know, what people like wanted to see, you know, what sort of ideas could I explore that were at least maybe hadn't been explored quite so much in other stories. And you know, VIPs I think were like an untapped market. You know, I had yet to see a story that came from the perspective of someone from Advent. And originally when I was writing the story, I didn't want it to end it. I really didn't want to end it on him like joining the Resistance. I wanted to keep it more like open than that. Obviously, I don't want to go too much into the ending because spoilers. Yeah, I mean, I did. He became a politician, but you know, I just it was really hard to like envision a position he could be in where he wasn't like where he had enough power that he could avoid getting like executed. It was a fun story to write because I really kept just writing myself into corners and it was like funny. It was like I would solve one thing and then they would be in more trouble, and like I think that's an important point to make as well. It's like sort of like my philosophy when it comes to writing is like the harder it is for like you to think of a solution to something the character is experiencing, like better it is to read. Like, you know, if it's actually genuinely hard for you to come up with what the character is going to do next, or not even what they're going to do next, but like how they can like solve this in a way that would be reasonable for their character, that makes for good reading, I think. But yeah, with I really prioritize character autonomy, and I'd argue especially so you should always prioritize character autonomy if it leads you down a path that is annoying to write, because you know people will read that and they will like see the effort you put in, and they will get more out of it, I think. And I'm trying to think of an example from Advent Provides where I did that, because I did that a lot, but it's been so long since I wrote it. It's been like a couple of years, or a year maybe, since I last worked on it. But oh yeah, the part where he gets interrogated by a sectoid. See, at that point I had really written myself into a corner, because I mean I couldn't reasonably justify him getting away with some of the stuff that he was doing. I mean, Advent is this monolithic authoritarian entity, and they are gonna investigate. Like, you know, they have this power, and he's drawn enough attention at that point that they're like, we gotta scope this guy out. And so essentially the only way to solve that was for you know, I didn't like have something where he was like, oh fuck, they can't read his mind because he's got like I don't know, brain worms or something. I don't know. But, like, you know, he got his mind read. Sectoid got kind of fucked up by what it saw. And the only way to save him was to have the morally dubious manager, of course, save him. But at the same time, the morally dubious manager isn't his friend. He's not doing this to help Lucas. He's doing it to help himself in a way. And so, you know, you're out of the frying. He was really out of the frying pan and into the fire with that point in the story.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite turning points of the story as well. I was like, oh, okay, this is really heating up.
Yeah,
like
there was just no way to not have a situation like that come up at that point in the story without, like, again, like I said, finagling the details. I mean, you can write anything. I mean, if I wanted to, I could have wrote, oh, he just ran off in the woods and he was so good at hiding they never found him, but that's not realistic, you know. You gotta really consider what the characters and the entities in your story are capable of, and like I said, I try to prioritize autonomy of characters and just, like, realism. Like, you know, if something bad can happen and it makes sense and it's realistic, it should probably happen, because that's kind of what happens in real life. I mean, fuck, I went to a wake a couple weeks ago, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get some gas. So, like, after the wake, I'm, like, driving to the gas station to get gas. I'm sad. It's, you know, it's not a great time, and I'm getting gas. Turn off my car, get gas. Car's driving fine. I fill up my tank with gas. I go to start my car. It doesn't start. It's fucking not starting. And it's just, like, shit like that.
Oh,
where it's like,
that's
you know,
very unfortunate. Yes.
Yeah. In real life, shit always compounds upon other shit. Like, it's never just, like, something bad happens. It's like, oh, whatever. It's like 3 things happen, like, every time, and it's so funny. Yeah, when it rains, it pours. It's very funny how shit works out like that. But, yeah, I mean, that's sort of my philosophy, I guess, on writing.
No, it's pretty sound. It's pretty sound, and I've kind of seen it in a decent amount of the samples I've read here, because I said I read quite a bit of XCOM fakes before I found the one that had the link in it to come here, and it seems like a lot of people do prioritize just characters having their own autonomy and trying to keep the stories they tell grounded, even when it's something more large, right? They still want to keep it grounded to a point, and that's a very hard balance to strike. But I think the setting itself of XCOM and the world, right, it lends itself very, very well to telling just those multifaceted stories. It's a very interesting setting. I do like it very much. But thank you very much for sharing. Did anybody else have any questions for AP?
Any other questions? I mean, I don't want to hog the floor. If anyone else wants to go. But yeah, I will say, Mordecai, yeah, I've heard people compare the opening to 1984 a little bit. What's funny is the first time I heard somebody say that, I hadn't read the book, and I didn't get to read the book in school, unfortunately. It was never assigned to us. But I had watched the movie, like, after somebody was like, oh yeah, your story kind of reminds me of 1984. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I could kind of see that after I watched the movie. But the comparison probably comes up because it's an overbearing authoritarian government, and with Advent, I really wanted to, like, I didn't necessarily want to dig into, like, the guts, but, like, I wanted to sort of show, like, how kind of, like, fucked up it would be to, like, live under an oppressive, like, alien regime that doesn't care about, like, human life, like, at all. They're melting people down into goo, but they pretend like they do. So that there's sort of, like, this facade going on where, like, unlike with 1984, they didn't even, like, pretend. They're just like, yeah, you live in fucking tenements and shit, and they're, like, literally removing language so people can't talk about it. In my story, it's sort of different because, like, there's this government that's, like, oppressive, they're melting down people, but they don't want people to know about it. They want people to think that they're good. and so there's sort of like I said, this facade, and sort of seeing the facade through the eyes of an Advent VIP, I think, because they're more privy to this sort of knowledge. So he's like kind of really straddling this line, basically, kind of like in 1984, actually, where like the guy was straddling a line because he was redacting information. He was like an information redactor from newspapers. So he was getting a little glimpses into like this facade that the government was building, and Lucas was also doing that as well. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely see the comparison for sure.
Pretty good.
But yeah.
All right. Well.
Any other questions? I could talk all day. I really can. Once I get going and I feel comfortable.
Oh yeah, same. This has been.
It's very easy.
Been great so far.
Thanks.
No problem.
Who wants to go next?
I think Drunken wants
be
to
shy.
go next. I think Drunken wants to go
Drunken.
next.
Go next. Oh, he's got to go to bed. Yeah, I'll get out of here. Get me out of here. Get
All
him
right. Let's see. Come on down.
Hey people, Drunken here. So I don't have much to say about my story because it's really like an early like proto idea. I think I'm going to start with the setting because it's not a fan fiction. It's mostly an idea of my own design and a world of my own design. I'm sure Vig knows all about this shit because I've talked to him ad nauseum about this world that I work in. I'm also not going to share my screen because if I do, there's going to be some spoilers that I do want to hide. So if that's okay with you guys, I hide some spoilers here.
That's fair enough. Just tell us what you want to tell us.
Yep. So the setting is basically a far future sci-fi setting, where the drives that humans use. I took inspiration from a lot of 40K. Sorry, Nuke, I love you. I'm gonna steal all your shit. I took a lot of inspiration from 40K because it's just a cool ass setting, and the drives that humans use tend to let in nasty monsters, and we need a company to clean up those monsters. And if we don't clean them up and enough fuss is made, then other species in the galaxy will not like us. And that will hurt the monopoly that humans have on just transportation because their drives are just the best at doing long-range hauling. They're like the cargoes of the galaxy. So the story is based in this universe where someone's working for a company that basically has to clean up these monsters that will kill you in fucking horrible Cthulhu damnations, you know? So I can actually do pretty flexible with this story setting because it's across like a vast distance. So I can have, if I want, like dystopian megacities to like frontier scrapyard desert planets. I can do Western if I really wanted to. That's kind of why I'm going with this idea. I can do Western to cyberpunk or dystopians at a whim. And I was planning for this to be. I don't know if this is gonna work out. I might ask your opinion on this one, Jeeves. If this is a good idea for a like how do I say this? A story structure.
Go ahead.
But I don't want it. I don't want it to be a linear story structure. I do want it to be a bit more disjointed from each chapter, where each chapter does follow the main characters. There are two main characters, but it follows each main character, and it's not always in the same timeline. So like some of it will happen earlier or before, but there is a progression of how the character acts or how the characters are. And there's going to be progression of like the characters and their main goals, because each one has their own goals and their own ends. And the story still is going to have their own progressions to find out as to why there's having more and more of these incidences that they have to clean up.
I'm thinking. So immediately I'm getting like Pulp Fiction vibes. Is that kind of where you're going, right? We're just it's a non-linear narrative, right? So essentially. Yeah,
it's non-linear. I wouldn't say most time, but sometimes it gets non-linear. and sometimes it'll change POV between the two main characters. But I'll make sure it's obvious.
So in my mind, I'm trying to imagine. So like chapter 1, main guy's point of view. Chapter 2, right, his main point of view. Story goes along. Then chapter 3, we're hearing from another character like 6 months in the past, something like that.
Yeah, like chapter 1 could be them going off on a mission as like an intro to what the story is, and then chapter 2 is back when they meet.
Chapter 2 is back when they meet. Yeah, it can work, but you're going to need a very, very tight outline, right? And you're going to actually need. Yeah, let me go back. I have this screen up, but yeah, your outline is going to need to be very, very tight. I'm just going to be honest with you, because if yours is non-linear and out of order like that, you really can't afford to make any mistakes.
I love making it hard myself.
Where was it? The tangible solutions? Was it? I forgot which slide it was on, but it was talking about. Wait. Yeah, right. So, alright, you have two different outlines, right? You have a living outline, which is your story tree is changing, and you are making adjustments to your outline as the story changes, which sounds like a lot of work, but honestly it's not. Then you have a dry outline, which is set in stone and has very minimal changes, right? People get so strict with dry outlines to where I've heard if you make over 6 changes, you need a new outline. You need a new story, essentially, right? I'm going to be honest with you. The story you're telling, you need to have a dry outline, right? Mm-hmm. And in not just a higher overview of your narrative, but just about every chapter might need an outline, because it's hard enough sometimes keeping plot holes and the narrative airtight with just a linear story, but your story is being told out of order and through different perspectives. So you have to be very, very careful, right? Because even if you just, slip up chapter 11, right, that can dramatically affect the way that chapter 19 reads if your story becomes that long. And
that's probably why I'm not going to publish it until it's done. For that exact problem right there, is plot holes.
Right. And you're definitely going to want it to be read by multiple eyes. You really do. Right. It can work. Don't get me wrong. There's been tons and tons of non-linear narratives told, but you have to be very, very careful, right? Because from what you said earlier and how you described yourself as a perfectionist, I imagine that even like a few would be enough to give you a heart attack.
Yeah.
Very good. Very, very interesting.
I took a lot of inspiration from a lot of things. I like cryptids. Thank you, Sweaty, for the Wendigo story. Well, I guess also Lethal Company came out at the right time, because that story wasn't the worst when Lethal Company came out, and that was like, oh great, good inspiration right here. So definitely I have a lot of people saying that I got inspiration from a lot of things. With the characters, I think I should probably move on to the character, would you say, or what? No, what do you recommend?
I would recommend. Yeah, tell me about the characters. Yeah. About the characters.
So there will be a varied cast of characters as I envision it, as a team, and they will work for each other or alone sometimes. Most of the cast will again be probably side characters, one-dimensional characters. But there'll be 2 main characters, which will be the bird and the human. And I think those are the POVs will be switching between the chapters. I kind of want to write them as opposites of each other, and as a way to kind of bounce back on each other. I don't want to have 2 of the same things, because that makes the story really boring to write and to read. Mm-hmm. I want to have the bird be, her background is as a medic, and she is idealistic, and she's protector type. She's caring, but sometimes also misguided in what her ends to protect people. and this leads into like her having a short king personality, where she is insecure about small stature and strength, and she does a lot of things to acquire power and pursue more strength in hopes to protect the people she can. And she's also a personable person and normally searches for peaceful solutions, and that kind of goes contrary to the main human that doesn't like to talk much, doesn't like to show much emotions, a very placid person with an indifferent outlook on people and life in general. Kind of an asshole, but also just protects. Like, he's also understands that the importance of keeping his team alive, so he will protect them if he has to. But also is quick to violence as a solution because he is indifferent to human life. And not to spoil, but there's a reason as to why he's like that. So I don't want to do too many spoilers as to why he doesn't really care about human life. But I guess also comes with the job where death comes quick.
Right, should be desensitized to it, definitely.
Yeah. That's partially the reason, yeah.
No, very good. You don't have to share more than you don't want to. Right, this is just for who wants to share. You don't have to feel forced to. But this is very good. If you
a lot of this will also probably be changed, maybe a little bit, because it's very, very like early idea. This is like a year or two down the line that I might like actually start writing this seriously.
Okay, so you're very, very far looking into the future.
I plan things. Doesn't mean I get to them very soon. I'm like a company.
Very excellent.
Okay. What should we move on to next?
Well, because yours is so far out. I doubt that you'll have a theme in place. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
what do you say? You cut out a little bit.
I'm sorry. Since yours is so far out as you're actually writing, I don't think that you have like a set theme yet, right? That's not something you're looking at.
Yeah, I'm still honestly figuring that one out.
And then
I actually do have a theme for just one of the characters, the bird character. I'm still figuring out the human and for the general story. But for the general theme of the story, I was going for like the choices people make and what they make to achieve their ends and what they think is right. I don't want the story to set in stone whatever is right or wrong. I don't have that, I guess, Tolkien vision of bad and good and evil, just like that. Where like the bird, a lot of her choices will come down to having her freedom or achieving more power. And if she can have her own freedom, pave her own path in life, and just kind of quit while she's ahead, or sell herself for more power, and how much is she willing to sell? Because in the story, it's pretty obvious by her character design that she's already sold quite a bit of herself to get stronger, both physically.
I see.
The human's still working. I'm still thinking about it.
Oh, very good. Okay, so you're gonna have instead of essential theme that which makes sense in a non-linear narrative. So you'll probably have just a collection of themes for your major characters. Then is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I like doing more character-driven themes, stuff like that.
So do you have I'm sorry, I was just going to ask if you had an idea of, like, overall, what you would want your story's message to be or theme to be.
That's something I'm still figuring out, but a lot of times, I write in an indifferent universe, so a lot of times the overall theme of the story, I would boil it more down to, like, the characters itself. I'm still figuring out the overall thing.
Alright, okay. You've got time since you're not starting for another 2 years. So you've got time to figure that out. But when you do, make sure it's a very prominent theme, right? Because you do want a central idea or message to anchor your story, whether it's non-linear or not, told from point A to point B. That message, right, that becomes the core of your narrative, it really enhances it if it's something that resonates well with readers. So you just keep that in mind as you keep working on the draft.
Yeah.
I think that was all the most important ones. I wouldn't do tone of voice because you're not working on the theme yet, so that one's not as quite prevalent. And conflict, I don't want you to spoil anything. So we can pass on that. You hit like the main important parts for me. Very, very nice.
Yeah, let me see. Tone, voice. I mean, it's gonna be mostly like grounded and sober tone to it, with a bit of brevity and comedy in between, because you gotta have the yin to the yang. Conflict. I have conflict and idea. I don't want to really say much of it because of spoilers, and also because I'm still working on the conflict as to what exactly I want it to be.
Right, understandable.
Well, outline. I mean, that is also like that's gonna take a lot of work for me because, as you stated correctly, I'm gonna have to outline a lot of things to make sure it doesn't fall apart, or I don't find myself in knots. So. Yeah, that's gonna have to be a lot of work, and I do have a rough outline that I do want. It's written down, but I also don't know if I should tell it because it's probably gonna change. I don't want to make any promises.
No, that's quite all right. Once you have something a bit more concrete, right, and then you can always come back and share. This is something that we're going to be. Well, I would love to continue doing if everyone else feels the same. So there'll be plenty more opportunities to do this exact same thing here. And we can hear how it's changed from month to month. So there's no pressure at all.
Yeah, that's basically all I got/want to share. Once I get more of a solid idea, I'll share a bit more.
That's quite acceptable. All right, very good. All right, we'll give him a virtual round of applause.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much. Was there anybody else? All right. Was anybody else? That's the question I should be asking you, Snake. Looking like Snake Eater wants to share. Is that what I'm getting? There's nothing to be shy about, right? We're all professionals here, for the most part. So,
Oh, I didn't know I could just press the button.
I think you can, because we have the same role.
Oh, the librarian?
I think that's what it is. I'm not sure.
Yes. Because I said, like, oh, I can talk about my story, even though it's like there's no plan. Well, I have like a vague outline in my head. I have like 2 pages written down.
Well, here, would you like it if I shared the actual outline for you to look at, and you could just kind of piecemeal together what you want to talk about?
Wait, what? Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. I have the outline. I could put it up for you to actually look at if you would like to.
Yes, outline of. Just put it in voice context.
Ooh, I'll share it like that. Okay.
Oh, almost like the update.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. In the meantime, right, why don't you go ahead and just give us the very, very basic rundown of what you're working on.
So, granted, it's a working title, but it kind of stuck. Well, currently I'm calling it Snakesgiving, because I got the idea around Thanksgiving time, and I would like to release it around Thanksgiving time. And it also has to do with Thanksgiving as, well, kind of a time frame around which things happen. So it's kind of like setting is similar to, AP's Burger Snake story, Vipers, Knights, and French Fries, in that it's basically like, set after the events of XCOM 2. Specifically, like, I have like a time skip of where it's like the opening is like 3 years after the events of XCOM 2, and then there's a skip, and there's the rest of it is like 6 or 7 years after. Because I wanted to like leapfrog over the events of XCOM Chimera Squad.
All right, so it's like what we're looking at. I think that game takes place 2035, right? Something like that. 2030 something for Chimera Squad. If I'm not mistaken.
No, that's 2040, right?
2040. Oh no, XCOM 2 ends in 2035, I think.
35.
Always
And then Chimera Squad is like 5 years after that. So basically, like, I don't have an ending in mind, actually. Not a real one. I have the goal, basically.
The goal is probably more important than the ending at this
It's
stage.
really a slice of life thing, to be honest. So basically, the inspiration for it was my linear algebra professor offered to host a Thanksgiving dinner for the students who couldn't go back home for Thanksgiving break.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, like, basically, the main character would be this guy who runs a restaurant, who basically decides, like, you know, who basically decides to, as like an enrichment activity at one of the, like, XCOM re-education centers for, you know, aliens after the war, decides to basically teach, you know, a bunch of Vipers about Thanksgiving, you know, by just hosting a Thanksgiving dinner. And then from there, he meets this one Viper who's a really good cook and has a passion for cooking. And, you know, like, basically, like, you know, they have a nice time, and then at the end of it, basically, he gives her his business card or whatever and says, like, oh, when you're out, meet me. I'd like to offer you a job. And then, you know, like, 2 or 3 years pass, and, like, you know, she shows up, and they actually get to know each other a lot better, and it turns out that she has a lot of like, basically guilt as to, like, what she did while she was under, like, the mind control of Advent. And basically, like, you know, they fall in love, and basically he helps her work through the fact that, you know, the things that she did weren't her fault, and she doesn't have to be guilty anymore. And that's, like, as much of an idea as I have.
Okay, so you can still embryonic, still working through some things.
Yes, I have literally 2 pages of story written down. If that. I was gonna write more during Christmas break, but I left the journal that I had written a page of work on in my dorm room that would wind up being 6 hours away.
So no writing for you, I assume.
Yes. And now I'm, like, wondering if it's like, oh god, am I even going to be able to release it by this year's Thanksgiving? Because I have a bunch of, I'm really busy right now with, like, classes.
Yes,
And I'm not really confident in my ability at writing. And it's like, you know, again, like, if you were to, like, just, like, oh, even, like, on the level of, like, writing a scene, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what do I want to happen here? Like, you know, I lack the breadth of experience to be able to, like, imagine what I want to happen.
very well said, Sweaty. Right. It really is the only way to get experience. Is you have to read and you have to write. Like I said earlier, I'm not sure if he was here, but I said earlier that writing, right, is a discipline first and a hobby second. And you have to treat it as such, because a lot of the shortfalls that writers have, it honestly comes from just lack of writing, right? Especially the ones that are cognitive, right? Where we think that we're not good enough, or we think that we don't possess the necessary skills to accomplish the task. You do, and those necessary skills, they come from writing when you can, and definitely reading. Now, it's a bit hard, you know, in college. It is, I will concede, but you shouldn't let your perceived skill level and talent stop you from writing, right? Where it's like, well, I don't think I'm good enough to do this, so obviously I shouldn't, right? No, that's a mental trick, right? You're getting wrapped up in cognitive foolery. You don't want to go down that line of thinking.
I do prefer editing to writing.
Well, we need good editors too. Definitely need good
Because
editors
it's like I don't have to think of like my own shit. I can just like refine what's there.
So I have a question for you, right? Since even with your basic idea draft that you have, right? I think you could actually pinpoint the kind of theme you want to have, right? That slice of life story. What theme are you thinking about?
You asked me that, and my brain immediately went blank. Like literally, I went like completely no thoughts, head empty. I'm like, oh, you see, this is why I really struggle to start. It's like, oh, like, it's like I try thinking and nothing comes.
That's all right. It'll get there eventually. Yes, we all have. Right. There's. Oh man, I can so many times, and I've been on a deadline before as well, where it's like, oh my goodness, I have to do this, and
I mean, I do have a deadline.
And I can't get
Although-
anything on paper.
You see, this is why I plan on being a physicist and not a professional author. I'll just give the floor to, I guess, Snake Eater.
Snake would like to talk. Okay, I'll drag you in here. That's me do it, I think. Where's the button to do that? Where's it out? There we go. Welcome aboard, my friend.
Okay, that's just weird. Sorry, I never actually dealt with one of these events yet.
I hear that a lot, but they're very handy for this kind of structure.
Alright, so I'm gonna just outline this with the fact that I tend to ramble, so if I do, just slap me.
Very good, I will.
So when I started actually writing my story, I actually got the inspiration of doing it from playing the games, funny enough. And in general, it came from the idea that I was playing XCOM 2 with one of the mods that allows you to basically play with aliens, right? And the faction they had in that was kind of just placeholder. This is faction aliens come from, don't ask about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I follow you.
And I had already played through the first game and absolutely enjoyed the hell out of it. And then the second game, I'm like, I was enjoying playing through that, and I'm like, there's a story behind this that hasn't been told. And I'm like, you know, if you're going to have a story about aliens, you'd have to start in a place where also most of the story writing, and I've seen in XCOM in general, hasn't come from, which is the space between the invasion and XCOM 2. There's a space there of almost 20 years that nobody talks about, really.
Very good point.
You know? And so my idea was I actually took a character, because I had actually basically taken my character from the first game and remade him in the second game. And I'm like, well, how would I get to that point? And so, funny enough, I actually I decided to more or less base my story in between the 2 points, because it's a perfectly open place. There's so much that we don't know anything about, which means that as a writer, I can make up shit to my heart's content as long as it doesn't interfere with the actual story. You know?
No,
like, who cares about, like, the main story? Nobody talks about, like, oh, the middle of the U.S., like just some bumfuck nowhere, small town. They always talk, especially number 2 and the later games, the larger cities, the more precedent like camps and stuff, and the factions with therefore in stuff like that. Which means there's just so much fertile ground that is completely untapped. And I figured, it'd be kind of fun to start a small story that's based in between. And so my original story idea started off with basically a survivor from the original XCOM organization. And funny enough, I actually went through and I played a game. I restarted XCOM 1. I tried to play a game and tried to tech up as hard as I could before it got to the base invasion, because that's where canonically the second game has the first game lost, Canonically speaking, for the second game, the first game, the base invasion was where they lost and were effectively defeated. And so I kind of wanted to first map out like how much tech you could theoretically have by that point, right? And just get a good starting framework on like what was available, what weapons, what technology, yada 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 yada. And then I went with the idea that basically, okay, so if someone's going to survive this, how?
And what did you come up with?
The easiest answer was exactly, funny enough, the actual character that I took from the first game and the second game fit perfectly in this because Exalt. The group, you send troops in the first game with the expansion to the game to go infiltrate the Exalt cell, which means he'd be away from base by himself. And basically, that's where I started my story, effectively, where he was away from base. He was actually, in my story, infiltrating the cell. I think it was in Russia is where I originally started it. Which means he is a continent and a half over, because in my story, I actually had XCOM technically based in the US. And so it took him months to get back after XCOM effectively just went dead. Couldn't get signals through to him, none of the backlines worked, yada yada yada. And so that was where I kind of started my story, and I loved it because the main character, I haven't really given a lot of information. I've hinted at what the main character is. But the idea I took from him as well was the fact that he is a in the first game, like when there were some mission rewards where you could get a much better soldier effectively, right?
Yes, I follow along.
Like you get like a sergeant or a captain, right? And so the idea was, in my mind, I formulated it as these were basically special forces guys that were effectively forwarded to XCOM from their units. And so my idea was, okay, what's an appropriately useful character that would probably end up as, for the XCOM framework, a sniper? And so my character the whole story goes around is Max, codename Cupid, with a funny backstory behind that. But basically, he's actually he's an Army Ranger, 75th Ranger Battalion. Basically, they do a lot of force recon and shit like that, so that would explain very heavily why he was already a good shot and all yada yada yada. And a lot of my story effectively goes around the idea that after he survives it, like, what the fuck do you even do? Right?
Yes, that's
where do you pick up from
question.
that?
So,
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, because you brought up that point, like, okay, where do you pick up from that? My question to you would be, for your plot and for your conflict, right, with the setting you chose, those two are going to be very, very closely aligned. More so than other stories, right? So my question to you is how you're striking that balance with your story, right? Because your plot and conflict would be like parallel lines closely riding each other. With the story you're going with.
And that's actually kind of the whole point, is that after he comes back from XCOM, and some of this will be spoilers, I apologize. So, blank it out if you don't want to hear it. But long story short, you probably found out if anybody reads my story, the idea was that he effectively got a what would be the word for it? Remember the gene soldiers from the first game?
What?
The genetically modified soldiers from XCOM, Enemy Unknown, or Enemy Within, technically.
No, I didn't finish anything.
Long story short, they use effectively a form of nanotech to heavily augment the soldiers, right? And the way I wanted to build it was a character who starts off actually really strong in terms of like abilities and whatnot, and then slowly break him down as the story goes on, whether that's through loss of gear, through loss of people, through loss of, in all honesty, his humanity. Because it's how far are you willing to become a monster to get what you're trying to get done. And the actual name of my story, funny enough, is Finding Humanity, because the idea was that the way I split it was that Vipers actually come in two different varieties, which is the pre-war and pre-invasion, post-invasion. Whereas the pre-invasion were a lot less tampered with overall, and then post-invasion, through the process of the invasion, they did a lot of more genetic tweaking to them. And so what it comes down to is the mind control techniques, the other things they used to control the Vipers pre-invasion, weren't able to scrub the entirety of who they are. And the things that should be the monsters in the stories, the aliens, because this is an XCOM story, some of these characters might end up having more humanity than the humans. They might be better people in the long term. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
And it's kind of asking that question of what makes the monster,
Right, and that's a great theme to explore. So make sure you keep it central for your story. Is this one you're still writing, correct?
Yes, I'm actually currently trying to edit.
Oh, very, very, very good. Yes, you have to keep that as a theme for your story. I mean, that's.
I constantly, I've been sort of drip feeding different abilities and information, because I didn't want to just be aha, and now he's super powered, blah, because that's boring. But there's also one other thing which I actually really enjoy about having the whole gene soldier thing, was the fact that one of the upgrades in the first game you could get actually is effectively a form of regeneration. And it's the modified bone marrow upgrade from the first game. And I actually looked at that really heavily because it's going to be a really important plot point, because it effectively cuts all healing by a third, and that includes things like broken bones, like severe injuries.
Oh my goodness.
Which means that my character could take a lot of punishment, but what does that do to your head? What is that? And also, there's another thing that people don't think about. And I love this idea but I came up with it because if you heal faster, your body gets over stressors, your physical, mental, yada, yada, yada. How much sleep do you need anymore? And what do you do with yourself if you don't sleep really that much? Like, let's say if you slept every 3 days, or even 2 days, what do you do all night?
You're up, wasting away. Your mind's deteriorating. That's
Well,
for
you
sure.
have to. He's a tinkerer. He already had mechanical skills at the very beginning of the story, and he's only thrown himself into that more and more as time's gone on, because it's really, really difficult. Like, I love the idea of giving somebody who has, like, let's say a superpower, right? In this case, he does. But there's also severe negatives to it. You know? Like the fact that he can heal ridiculously quick, but his body's going to go through calories like crazy. Also, the same fact, he heals really fast, but his body doesn't need as much sleep, which means he now has to find shit to keep himself busy, or he will literally lose his fucking mind over the years that he has to live. And it's just like, how much is that going to affect you? You know? And it's kind of the slow breaking down of the character over time, as these things start to slowly compound over and over. And I really enjoy the idea of, like, how far is that going to twist the person to the point where you don't recognize yourself in a mirror. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I do. I follow along. It's very...
And what's it going to take to pull you back from that? Or push you over the edge and to become that monster you see in the mirror? You know? And I love the idea that you can get characters who, even though they're supposed to be the monstrous one, they have more innocence. They have more empathy, to be perfectly honest, than someone who's been basically put through hell and back.
Right, and then, yes, I do agree. It's the theme is quite clear, which doesn't happen very often. Most that I've talked to, or even in the professional scene that I know, when they're writing for different stories, the theme was not usually one of the first or second things that they had that was already so clear to be pursuing. So it's a good thing that you have yours together. It really is, and I think that'll help you with your outline that you do stay much, much more organized, because beyond having a goal to work for or work towards, with your narrative, the theme itself almost a bit feels like your end goal, right? What you're trying to get to the bottom of.
It pretty much is. Like, what the overall, like, effectively conflict is more or less the fact that he's now in a world that no longer accepts what he is. He's a pre-invasion soldier in a world where the enemy won. And how do you deal with that? Because he tried fighting it for the first part of my couple of chapters, and they got fucking decimated. So now what? You know, that is basically his major conflict is, now what the fuck do I do with myself? And I actually have a bunch of story points I'm going to be going with, and exactly what the idea is. The overall idea of my story, and this major spoiler, he's effectively going to be part of the reason why, in that one mod, the alien faction formed in the first place. Because he can't stop the army by himself. He's just a single person.
Of course not.
And over time, he's going to pick up, let's say, one person. He helps one person. He helps another person. You know, he saves this small group of, like, vipers, effectively, from some facility where they're basically being reprocessed. You know, he's basically going to pick up all the misfits, the defectives that XCOM 2 actually shows exist in the actual canon, because they actually have a bunch of hybrids who effectively are defective, for lack of a better word. And eventually, it's going to come down to the fact that she's effectively created a small army in its own right. You know? And then, at that point, it's going to be like, what do you do now? Because now you have something to actually care about, something you want to protect. You know, it's a good way of going through this. I've always liked this.
No, it's I'm very. I was gonna say happy, but no, I think what I'm looking for is impressed, right? Because it's very, very clear cut out, and you didn't do the outline. Well, actually, you didn't, right? No,
I didn't do it. I don't know. I'm doing this all off the top of my head.
Well, it's pretty coherent. I would make sure that you probably do organize it right before a detail escapes you, because what you said so far is very, very cohesive and cohesive and concise, right? So I would encourage you wholeheartedly to please try to get it on an outline.
Yeah, and I have two main characters as of right now, which is Max, the soldier, and then Essie, who's the Viper, who, technically speaking, was an enemy. He actually shoots her in the freaking head when he first runs into her in their first meeting, effectively. It was a non-standard round that actually ends up being the major reason why she actually ends up freeing herself from mind control, because effectively a chunk of the copper jacket of the round actually embeds itself into the fucking microchip in the side of her head. And the third character I haven't actually introduced yet. But to me it's going to be more of a kind of the character itself in the story is going to be more of a blank slate type character to show that the aliens themselves don't start off as terrible people. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's going to become more of a way of driving forward the theme a bit better, I think. And also yes, the Thin Men were technically modified Vipers, but that would be technically during the invasion, which is why I'm sort of splitting them between post and pre and post, effectively. I would consider the Thin Men as part of the post invasion because they would have been created during the invasion, you know. And I don't remember that they actually said how long the Thin Men themselves were actually present on Earth before the actual invasion started. So, actually, I haven't thought about that. I want to think about that a little longer now. Thanks for bringing that up. Anyway, is there anything else?
I think
or have I talked too much?
No, you just don't feel like that. No, but no, seriously, I think you've literally hit every single point of the outline without having done one. That's very remarkable. Thank you very much.
Well, I did pull up your example outline just so I can look at it.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, I was wondering because I was like, that's very.
I did pull up the example outline, so I had something to look at to kind of just form my ideas into a cohesive thought.
Okay, I was wondering because I was going to say that was very, very concise for just going off the top of your head guessing. But that makes sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If there are no further questions, who would like to go next? We should have
I believe Sweaty just said he would, so I'll leave the stage.
Very, very good, Sweaty. Go ahead and request, and I'll pull you right in. Well, even if you request, I forgot your moderator. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry. I think it's the right microphone.
I can hear you. A little low, but I can't hear you.
Hopefully it's more clear. It has to be the right microphone. Let's check here. Yes, I go in voice chat very often, as you guys can tell. Okay. Well, guess I mostly just wanted to talk about something really, maybe something I realized when I was doing the outline that he gave me. You know, learning. It's crazy, right? But that's what ended up happening. So let me go grab it real quick. If I can actually open it up on the computer. I can. Okay. So I'm not just going to read off the outline because if I do that, it's going to take a long time. Alright, well I think something that I noticed is just how the way you set up your characters defines almost your entire story, because I write very character-driven stories. So the characters are the center of how everything operates, how it works, their motivations, and how they clash drives scenes that will come up. And as I was kind of like writing down, what are these 4 characters I have here, right? And writing down what motivated them, it's like, well, wait a minute, there's some interesting things here. The 4 characters I have, and specifically the traits they have, one is motivated, or 2 of them are motivated by, what's the word? Self-interest, I guess. So they're internally motivated. They have something inside them that they want to have met. And 2 of them are externally motivated. However, in the story, that doesn't mean they're both on the same side. Like there's an internally and an externally motivated person on the protagonist team, and there's an internally and externally motivated person on the antagonist team. And further than that, like if I think further, 2 people are, I guess I'm just speaking abstract, so I should probably just get concrete things now. I'm gonna, I guess I'll read off the outline if you don't mind that.
Go ahead, of course.
Okay. So here's my characters. So we have Maddie Carrots, a Maori woman who's taken up the mantle of oil company executive. Maddie's fiercely independent and insists on doing everything herself and is quick to anger. However, in quieter moments and with people she trusts, she is willing to listen and open up. She is motivated by the freedom running a company provides. There's no one above her, and she only reports to herself. Wilson Baker, human man, partial owner of the company. Wilson is analytical, cautious, reserved. If he feels a negative emotion, he doesn't show it. But regardless, he tries to maintain a respectful and polite outward experience. And Wilson's motivated by proving himself. He validates his existence on the feelings of others toward him. And then on the antagonist side, we have Georgia, she's a woman from old money. Seeing how this story takes place in the South, you can put a few things together and guess where that comes from. The United States South, American South, but anyways. And it takes place in 1909. Wow. Yeah, okay, I really should have just read this outline. It was like, I'm just going off right now, and none of it makes sense without context. So Georgia Line, she's analytical and manipulative. She's good at understanding people's desires and using them for her own purposes. If she's angry, she will be passive-aggressive. If she's happy, she enjoys sharing it with other people. Georgia Line is also motivated by proving herself. So in comparison, while Wilson seeks approval from everyone, Georgia seeks approval from a few persons. So there's some differences and nuance in there. And then the 4th character is Lillian, who's a cheetah woman with no money. She comes with no money. Lillian's giving and she's kind. If she's in need of help, Lillian is happy to provide. If someone is in need of help, Lillian is happy to provide. So she's a helper. She's compassionate. Very nice person. And Lillian's motivated currently in the story by the money that working for Georgia provides her. So she's kind of externally motivated by, I don't know what you'd call that, basic survival. But she's motivated by seeing good in the world and good things, which is interesting because she's on the antagonist team. But those are the 4 characters. I don't know how well that absorbed in people's brains because I just put into everyone's head there. So I'm going to skip down to conflict section. So The main conflict in the story is primarily the one for dominance. So there's two companies, and they both want to be one because they're fighting over the state industry, and they want to establish themselves as the one on top. These companies are, of course, headed by the characters, and in particular Maddie and George line. But the way that they put their company on top is directed by how their motivations work. So Maddie is, let's see here. How does Maddie work again? Let's go read. She's motivated by freedom, and George Line's motivated by external validation from a few people. So the way that they run their company is directed by that, and I think that allows the story. What's the right way to put this? It's action. You're showing how these characters work through actions, right? And that's important. You don't just
Yes,
say,
it
this
is
how
very
they
so.
operate. It's in everything they do, and primarily in the conflict, right? Because that's what drives the story forward. Important to show that. But my main idea is that conflict is juxtaposition. So you put two ideas right next to each other, and you see in their contrast. I think basically all conflict is a contrast, really. Like, you just have two ideas and they don't agree. And I'm sure someone could poke some holes in that. But that's how I see it right now. It's worked so far. Because the fact that juxtaposition or conflict is juxtaposition, and conflict makes the reader want to read, right? It's intriguing. You want to see who wins. You want to see how things end up. These four characters really contrast each other. They're just huge juxtapositions toward each other. Like, if I could draw a Venn diagram, there'd be a lot of intersections, I guess. And that allows, ultimately, for scenes to happen. Like, that's what I'm struggling with, is the middle, right? Or the meddling middle. I don't know what people like to call it. But you have your beginning of your story where you're like, okay, I'm setting up the character. Sure, I can do that, maybe. You have your end of your story, you're like, okay, this is when everything happens. Like, the thing that I had in my head imagined is now happening, and this is how it's going to work. But the middle, you have to get there, and that can be a struggle sometimes. But by using the conflict that arises from character juxtaposition, you can kind of find scenes that are inherently intriguing to the reader. Like, it's pretty difficult for them to not be intriguing because you're taking two abstract ideas, shoving them into some characters, and then you just see what happens. If that makes any sense.
No, it does. And that's a main point, how a lot of narratives drive conflict, right? To opposing ideologies.
Yeah.
No, it's quite right. No, it's good. That's good. Please continue.
So here's some examples of these characters that I didn't really describe too well, but maybe some people remember them. Maddie and Wilson, the rebels of the cultural system. It's the United States in 1909, except as furries. Go figure, right? George Line and Lillian are products of the system. So we have two ideas right there. Like, we have rebels, and we have, the establishment. That in itself could be a scene. There could be a conflict where one side gains power over the other because they're the rebels, their establishment. Depends on the context, right?
Yep.
Wilson and George are both motivated by external validation, while Maddie and Lynn are internally motivated. So those motivations also allow the characters to see things in one another. So Wilson and Georgia, they're externally validated people. So that could be a scene where they're like, oh, this is how you feel about this, well, I kind of feel the same way. And they can make common ground, which is interesting because they're in two different teams. Same thing with Maddie and Lillian. They're internally motivated. They're like, well, I just do this because I feel free doing this. This makes me feel like I can handle the world. I can have control. I mean, not control, but just the ability to do what I want. And the other's like, well, I like to be able to do good things in the world, and this enables me to do good things in the world. And those aren't exactly the same, but it's just another opportunity. And just even down, so that's like their motivations, right? But it even goes down to just like character traits or personalities. So Georgia and Wilson are analytical, so they can relate on that. They kind of see the world in the same way. What they decide to do with how they see the world is going to be different, but they can both understand how they might work. Maddie and Lillian kind of show off how they feel in their sleeves, so they can go, you know, like if they're talking with each other, they're going to have an easier time because the way they show emotions they're familiar with, they can relate with. That's another scene, you know, that's a moment that they can both have with each other and relate. I keep bringing that up because all of those juxtapositions create content, or I hate using that word, it shouldn't be used, but you know, things to be written, ideas that need to be shown to the reader, because it can be difficult to find those, I think, because it can be hard to go, you know, this is what I want, how do I get there, how to make a story. And so I really encourage everyone to take a look at their characters and just like draw conclusions. Just look at every single pawn of the board and figure out how they're different, how they're the same, because that right there is how you're going to write a story.
Very good.
But that's all I really have. I just wanted to say that. I mean, I can wax and wane on about the story, and but,
yes, as we all can. But no, I'm glad you did check, 'cause I didn't think you were going to join today.
I mean, neither, but you know, I got lucky.
Thank you very much. And I did read. I didn't respond back to you. I forgot to send a message, but I did read your.
I did the same thing then. Don't worry.
No, I did read your draft. I actually have it. I was showing it earlier as the example when I had it up. But thank you for taking the time to do it, and thank you to everyone who took the time to do it. I know it's very weird when strange internet man asked you to do random homework, but it was very nice to read the ones you guys sent in, because I did read them all.
Well, I thought it was fun. Like, okay, well, besides the fact that I'm just a nerd, you know, and I got all A's in high school, it was enjoyable because I got to make some realizations. So I think you accomplished, you know, what you set out to do as a teacher. Maybe some people learned some things.
That's always the hope, to learn something.
Yeah.
Always the
Hope.
I try to have some, but this has been very nice. Was there anybody else? I didn't check this chat. I see a bunch of missed messages, unfortunately. Did anybody ask to go next? And it went past. We probably have time for one more.
Yeah, you've been here for 3 hours now?
Yes, 3:07 as the recording says.
Yeah. I mean, time flies when you're having fun. I just hope it's flying, I guess. I think Nuke wants to go, is that what he's implying?
It shortens all these names to M. What everyone's names?
I'm glad you found this informative, Nas.
Yes, I am as well.
Just raw thought. He's giving us the... Okay, well, I'll step off now. Thank you, Juice.
No problem. Well, if there is nobody else, I suppose I should bring us to the end. I really just wanted to say thank you guys for taking the time to humor me and come to this workshop. It was very, very fun for me to put together, because it's a little different than what I get to do in my day job. And it was very enjoyable, right? And I got to you guys' thoughts about how you approach your own writing tasks and what you guys shared. It was a great learning experience for me as well. I learned a few things, especially about some of you guys' own methods. And it's just been a great experience. I don't want to keep rambling on, but you guys have been an excellent class. And I would love to do this again ideally next month, probably around the same time. My goal is to do it at the end of every month, like that last Saturday in every month, right? Give me time to get the slides together and prepare lesson plans and whatnot, and hopefully get those interactive assignments out to you guys ahead of time if anyone wants to do them. But I'm glad you guys did. I was honest. I didn't think people would really, want to do it. Extra work when you have other stuff to do. But it was very encouraging. Yes, it will be around the same time as well. If the time is not good, I can do a when to meet poll and figure out something else. I just chose this time because it seemed like the best compromise, right? But I'm not sure. If the time is not good, I can put together a when to meet poll and then go from there. Of course, Nuke, want to say something? Come on.
Hello. I just wanted to ask a couple questions. Where exactly are you going to post the recording, if there is going to be a recording?
Yes, I have been recording. I will edit it and clean some things up, and I'm going to post it to my personal YouTube channel, right? I can't just drop, several gigabyte large files in Discord. So I'll post it on my YouTube channel, and of course I'll announce the link for everyone who wants to come watch it.
Okay. Also, do you have like a syllabus or something in mind for this sort of thing, or is it just going to be the same sort of feedback workshop, or like are you going to deliver different lessons every month?
Yes.
Are you going to comment? Okay.
I will deliver different lessons every month. It'll be a different central theme. Like I'm already planning next month's, right? Writer's block again. It'll be something else. But I'll always will at the end have this open floor session, right? The only thing about that may change is that maybe next month I'll have a different sort of activity to coincide with what you've been working on, right? Just to keep it kind of fresh, if that makes sense.
Alright, gotcha.
And if there are any other questions, please ask. I'm still here. Would I guess consider this part office hours for me then.
Oh yeah. You said we were going to do this at around the same time next month.
Yeah. Yes, that is the plan. Around the same time next month. I just have to make sure that I for sure clear my schedule and tell everyone don't bother me, leave me alone. So that's looking like it's going to be
The 24th.
the 24th. I just gotta make sure that I have nothing going on the 24th. But if the 24th doesn't work, I will let you in. Oh, I'll let everybody know. Not let you in. I'll let everybody know.
Alright, perfect. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Jeeve. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else here does too.
You're very welcome, and I thank you for letting me put this on. Right, you guys didn't have to. You could have been like, no, we're not doing that. But I appreciate the warm reception to the server. You guys have been very, very kind to me.
Yeah, this is great. This was. I'm excited to do this again.
Sounds great to me. I will make sure to get this video edited and posted promptly. But other than that, you guys are free to head out. All I can really say is thank you very much.